entering her home, would not have consented to him lying in wait. You may consider that evidence only for that purpose and for no other. But no, you may consider that evidence, I neglected to state, with respect to her state of mind of being in fear. Okay, there you go. All right, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Angelique G.
The first initial of last name is G, is that correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay. If you could raise your right hand, please, my clerk, please.
Come here, please. This way. You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell your first name.
Angeli G. Angeli.
Okay, first initial of your last name is G.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to lean right into the microphone so everybody
Yes.
can hear you. All right, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Morning.
Do you know someone by the name of Gareth Pursehouse?
Yes.
Do you see him in court today?
Yes.
Could you please identify him by telling us where he's seated and what he's wearing?
Over there, he's in a suit.
Could you describe the color and shirt?
Looks blue and blue.
Blue and blue what? Blue shirt and,
Blue blazer, blue shirt.
okay, identify the defendant.
When did you first meet the defendant?
About 2 or 3 weeks before Valentine's Day, 2020.
And how did you meet him?
On Tinder.
And for people that don't know, what is Tinder?
It's a dating app.
And you met each other on the actual application?
Yes.
Did you communicate with each other using the Tinder app itself?
For a brief period of time.
Soon thereafter, did you continue your communication via cell phone?
Yes.
In order to do that, do you actually have to exchange phone numbers with a person?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
And did you actually exchange phone numbers with the defendant?
Yes.
Did you store him in your cell phone number under his name and phone number?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when you started to communicate outside of the Tinder application, did you exchange text messages?
Yes.
Did you exchange phone calls?
Yes.
How often would you say you communicated in the 2 weeks prior to Valentine's Day of 2020?
At least once a day.
Can you all hear?
No.
Okay, you're going to have to.
Sorry.
Yeah, please.
And that could move a little bit too if you wanted to.
No, scoot up. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, that.
I'll ask again.
Okay,
Actually, I don't remember my question.
can you read it back? That's important. Thank you.
Question, how often would you say you communicated in the 2 weeks prior to Valentine's Day of 2020? And your answer was at least once a day.
When you say once a day, would that be either by text message or phone call?
Sure.
Now, when did you finally see each other in person after first meeting on the application?
Maybe a couple days after meeting on the application.
In the 2 weeks leading up to Valentine's Day of 2020, how often had you seen each other in person?
2 to 4 times.
2 to 4 times?
Yeah.
Now, I know this is an embarrassing question, but I have to ask, were you intimate during any of those meetings that you had with the defendant those 2 to 4 times?
Yes.
Now, I wanted to bring your attention to Valentine's Day itself, February 14th of 2020. Did you guys actually communicate on that day?
Yes.
Was that via phone call or text message?
I think it was text.
At this time, Your Honor, the people are holding a series of text messages. It's one page made out of marked as people's next in order.
68.
Showing you what's been marked as people 68. Do you recognize these series of text messages?
Yes.
Do you recognize these as the text messages you exchanged with the defendant?
Yes.
Now, I'm turning your attention to a text message that's in green? Are those text messages that you sent or text messages that you received?
I sent those.
And the text messages that have a dark background, what appears to be a dark gray or black background, are those text messages that you received from the defendant?
Correct.
Now I'm pointing your attention to the text message in green where it says, "What are you up to and why haven't you asked me out tonight? Sad face." Is that a text message that you sent to the defendant on Valentine's Day?
Yes.
And did he respond to you shortly thereafter?
Yes.
Now, what time was that?
Looks like about 7 p.m.
Can you see it better there?
6:48 p.m. It says.
And what was his response to you?
En route home, I told you I'm busy all week.
Now, did you expect to hang out with him that day?
I did.
And why did you expect to hang out with him on Valentine's Day?
We had been hanging out and I enjoyed his company.
Now, did you find it kind of annoying that his response to you about Valentine's Day was that he'd be busy all week?
Yes.
Did he actually tell you what he was doing that day?
He said he was working on projects with some friends.
Did you find that to be a good excuse to not go out for Valentine's Day together?
Not particularly, but it is what it is.
Now, did you exchange text messages the next day, February 15th, 2020?
Yes.
Now, I'm showing you another series of text messages. When was your first communication the next day?
10:59 a.m.
And what was that communication?
He texted me, "Morning sunshine." I said, "Hi." He said, "What are you up to?"
Now, morning sunshine, was that the first communication you and the defendant had on February 15th?
Yes.
So he initiated that communication with you.
Correct.
Now, in response to the defendants asking you, "What are you up to?" there was a series of text messages here. "Just got back from walking dogs. Think I'm gonna ride my bike to the beach in a bit. It's gorgeous out. Oh, and getting quotes for a trip." Is that your response to the defendant?
Yes.
What do you mean when you say, "Oh, and getting quotes for a trip"?
I was looking into how much a trip would cost.
What kind of, like a trip?
Out of to like a vacation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, it's the same.
Well, let me ask you this, and the reasons for those questions is a segue into this. Did you end up seeing the defendant that day?
Yes.
And how did you go about meeting up with the defendant on February 15th, 2020?
I rode my bike on the beach and I stopped by his place.
And how did you go about getting a bike to ride over to the defendant's place?
I got a jump bike, which is an electronic bike that you can rent.
Now, when you talk about a jump bike, is that one of those ride share bikes that you see on the side of the road that you
Yes.
use your phone to ride?
Correct.
And when you do that, you utilize your cell phone. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you receive,
Counsel, we laying a foundation for something?
yes,
Okay, I'll give you some leeway.
thank you. And do you receive a receipt as a result of that ride?
Yes, you do.
Your Honor, at this time, the people are holding a receipt of a trip. May that be marked as People 69?
Yes.
Showing you what's been marked as People 69. Do you recognize what's photographed here?
Yes.
And how do you recognize that?
That's the route I took to get to his place. It's along the boardwalk.
So is this receipt reflect your trip from your house to the defendant's house?
Correct.
And he lives in what city?
Playa del Rey Road.
I'm gonna zoom in here just a little bit. Where my fingers pointed indicates Saturday, February 15th, by 29768, 12:29 to 1:40 p.m. Did you arrive at the defendant's house at 1:40 p.m. as reflected in this receipt?
Objection waiting.
Go ahead, sustained. ask the next question.
Can you describe the time frame that's, explain the time frame that's depicted in People 69?
I arrived at his house at 1:40 p.m.
And what does 1229 signify?
The time I left my house.
So it took you approximately 72 minutes to get from your house in, where was that?
Santa Monica.
To Playa del Rey?
Correct.
Now, what did you do once you arrived at the defendant's house at around 1:40 p.m.?
He greeted me. We went up to his place, and he was doing some work on the French doors at the front of his place, and I helped him organize his apartment.
How long would you say you were in his apartment for that evening or that day?
Maybe 2 hours.
And what would you say his demeanor was when you initially saw him?
He greeted me, and after that, he seemed sad and distant, I'd say.
Now,
I'm sorry, I could not hear.
You seem sad and
Distant.
distant.
Thank you.
were you intimate on this occasion when you went to the defendant's house?
No, ma'am.
Did you guys hug or kiss?
I think we hugged, but that's it.
You may have kissed, or you unsure?
Maybe.
Was that something that you would have customarily done in the prior times?
It's this thing that, sorry, Counsel.
Now, you said you hung out in the defendant's house for about a couple of hours. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you guys decide to do anything else aside from just stay at his place?
No.
Was there any conversation about doing anything else aside from helping him organize his house?
At that point, no.
At what point did you guys discuss doing anything else aside from staying home?
Prior to my riding the bike along the boardwalk, we discussed what if we wanted to hang out today and what we would do.
Was this on a phone call?
Correct.
And what was the discussion in regards to what to do that day?
I think we threw out ideas. I don't recall exactly, but I think he suggested maybe going to the shooting range. I wanted to go to the beach because it was a beautiful day out and I wanted to be outside. He said he couldn't go in the sun because his skin was sensitive.
Overall,
Because I'm sorry, what?
He said his skin was sensitive, so he couldn't be outside. And I think he suggested going to the shooting range after that. And that's, I think, when I said, I'll just ride my bike up to you and teach you how to use the jump bike, because he'd never ridden one before.
Now, while you were hanging out with the defendant in his apartment, did you notice any injuries to him?
Yes.
And what kind of injury did you notice?
There was a bruise under his eye and maybe some scratches on his face.
Did you?
I didn't even get that either.
Bruise under his eye and scratches on his face.
Okay.
On his face.
So just so that people can hear you, why don't you try to maybe keep your voice up just a tiny bit?
Sure.
Thank you. You said you noticed a bruise and some scratches. Do you know which eye?
I think it was his right eye. He had
Is
a
that-
bruise.
I'm sorry, is that to the best of your recollection as you sit here today?
Correct.
Did you ask him about how he got this bruise and on his eye?
I did.
And what was his response?
I believe he said he cut himself shaving.
Did you find that response to be odd?
Objection calls for an irrelevant response.
All right, sustained.
Did you believe him?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
So his response to you asking him about a bruise under his eye was that he cut himself shaving.
Objection has been answered.
Well, overruled, because there were two injuries, types of injuries noted. One was scratches to his face, the other one was the eye bruise. So you can ask the question. Once you ask, we ask it again. If you would, please.
Go ahead and
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
so his response to you asking about how he received a bruise on his eye was that he cut himself shaving.
Correct.
When you say there was a bruise on his eye, did it appear to be a black eye? What kind of bruise?
It looked like a small black eye. Correct.
Had you seen a black eye on him prior to that day?
No.
Now, I know you said you hung out with him at his place for a couple of hours. At any point during the time you were with him, did he ever mention that he ran into an ex-girlfriend recently?
No.
Did he mention to you that he actually went to his ex-girlfriend's house on Valentine's Day?
No.
Did he appear distraught to you when he was hanging out with you?
Well, she said appear as opposed to wasn't distraught all along.
No.
In any of the times that you hung out, did he ever mention running into his ex-girlfriend?
No.
Did he indicate any thoughts to you on February 15th when you were hanging out at his house that he was very depressed?
No.
Did he indicate to you that he was at all suicidal while you were hanging out with him?
No.
Did he ever, in the time that he spent with you, express that he was suicidal?
No.
Thank you. No further questions. John.
Cross-examination.
John, I actually have a couple of other questions. May I reopen for just a moment?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Prior to testifying today, you had a conversation with me today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you also have a conversation with defense prior to your testimony today?
Yes.
And when was that?
A few weeks ago.
And during your conversation with defense a few weeks ago, were you asked certain questions in regards to your interaction with the defendant on February 15th, 2020?
Yes.
What sort of question was asked of you in regards to what you guys did together on February 15th, 2020? Now, in regards to your activities with the defendant on February 15th, 2020, you gave a statement to detectives. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you gave this statement to detectives around the time the defendant was arrested. Is that right?
Yes.
Were you with the defendant when he was actually arrested?
Yes.
Where were you guys going?
He was dropping me off at my house.
And during that conversation with detectives, you indicated to them what you did with the defendant while you guys were hanging out. Is that right?
Correct.
Was that same sort of question asked from you by the defense?
Yes.
Did the defense bring up with you that
Back to the line of questioning, Your Honor.
Well, I haven't heard the question.
But it's again going into what the defense asked.
Let me hear the question.
was there any questioning that was initiated by the defense in regards to the defendant asking you to go to a shooting range?
All right. Sustained. Good one.
Withdrawn. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right.
And that question is strict and true to disregard
Yes.
that. Hello, Ms. G.
Hello.
Let me just get organized here. Oops. Thank you. Okay. Make sure I have everything. Let's see if this stays up here.
All right, so I wanted to start by asking you when the first time was that you met Gareth.
It was a few weeks prior to February 15th, 2020.
Do you remember the date?
No.
Okay. And when you met him, what did you guys do?
We went to a comedy club.
And was this for a friend's birthday?
Correct. Yeah.
Do you remember who that friend was?
No.
does the name Corey Soria sound familiar?
Sorry, no.
Okay. And that was at the, which comedy club was it?
The Comedy Store or the Laugh Factory? I can't recall
One of
which
those
one.
two?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you both arrive late and then leave early?
Um, I don't recall arriving late or leaving early. But
Okay. You just arrived whenever and
Yeah.
left whenever. And do you know approximately the date you first started interacting with Gareth?
Again, a few weeks prior to February 15th.
Okay. So on February 15th, you got this text message, morning sunshine, and you decide to take your jump bike and ride to Gareth's apartment. Is that right?
Yes.
And how many times had you been to that apartment?
I think twice before.
Okay. Twice. So this was the third time?
Yeah, either the second or third time.
Okay.
Yep.
And when you arrived, did you find that the condition of his apartment kind of bothered you?
Yes.
And could you tell us why it bothered you?
It was just disorganized. I think he was doing construction work on his front patio doors. So all of his things were kind of like piled away from that area, and it was messy.
And so you found it very disorganized, and did you suggest that you help him organize everything?
Correct. Yeah.
I'd like to show you some pictures if this will stay up. When you were at this apartment, do you remember what street it was on?
No.
Do you remember the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Was he in an apartment building, or was his unit attached to a standalone home?
It was attached to a standalone home. It was like the lower level, I think.
So it's kind of like what someone might call a granny flat or a,
Sure. Yeah.
okay. So I have a series of photographs I'd like to mark. What's the next one in order?
Is there the double S, so photograph 1 through what now?
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 photographs.
All right.
D 1 through 9. May I use this? I have actually 16 runner. So it's different. D 1 through 16.
Double S, 1 through 16.
we marked defense SS1. Do you recognize this location?
Yes.
Is that the living room of Gareth's residence?
Yes.
Showing you it's marked defense SS2. This is part of the living
Yes.
room.
Yes.
Was this the type of condition that you saw it in?
Correct.
This is the other side of that built-in cabinetry in the living room area.
Yes.
And is this the condition you saw it in?
Yes.
That was defense 4. No, 3. This is defense 4. Double S4. Is this the condition?
Yes. Yes.
All right, let's approach it with it.
This is defense 4. Double S4. Is this the condition?
Yes. Yes.
All right, let's approach it with it. All right, counsel.
All right, so the next one would be double S5.
All right.
And the one puts 6 photos, 6 additional photos.
6 additional photos and plus 16?
No, you said pick 6. So
Yeah, sure.
6.
Whatever you want. That's fine.
Okay. Does this accurately reflect the state?
Yes.
There seems to be construction materials. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is this the state of his bathroom?
Yes.
And this is 6. This is 6. This is the living room again,
Yes.
and that's an accurate representation.
Yes.
Seven. This is SS8. Is this accurate representation?
Yes.
SS9. This is an accurate representation.
Yes.
And Last one, SS10. You were in his garage when you went to get into the vehicle to be driven home.
Yes.
Is this an accurate representation of the garage?
I don't recall the garage.
Okay.
So Ms. Burstein-Lev, I'm just going to modify a double S is 1 through 10 as opposed to 1 through 16.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yep. So it's 1 through 10.
Did you remember telling the detectives who interviewed you after the vehicle that you were in with Gareth was stopped? Do you recall telling the detectives that his place was disgusting?
Probably, yes.
Well, prior to testifying today, in addition to speaking with the prosecution, did you get to review the audio tape of your interview with detectives?
I read the transcript.
You read a transcript? And do you recall telling the detectives that Mr. Pursehouse, or Gareth had told you that he'd had an excruciating breakup with an ex?
Objection, hearsay.
Interesting.
Well, this witness was asked on direct about this.
Objection, hearsay.
The question was whether or not he ever mentioned an individual or a prior relationship with this individual. You can ask that.
Well, but he had told you he had a bad breakup.
Objection, hearsay.
Okay. Did he ever mention that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll allow that.
So he told you he had this excruciating breakup.
Well, I'll allow the prior answer to stand and let's move on.
Okay.
A bad breakup.
And had you tried to talk to Gareth and get to know him on a deeper level and find it was difficult for him to open up to you?
Somewhat, yeah.
And you said that when you saw him on the 15th, when you went to his place on the 15th, he didn't seem as he normally was. He seemed sad and distant.
Correct.
And how could you tell he was sad and distant?
We didn't chat much, and he was kind of staring off into space, doing something on electrical on the door.
And do you recall saying to me when we spoke that you felt sorry for him and you wanted to be there when he was sad, the same way he had been there for you when you were sad?
Yes.
I'd like to talk to you about when you left Gareth's place. You had ridden a bike to his home, but you didn't want to have to ride it back. Is that correct?
I was going to ride it back. He offered to drive me home.
Okay.
I like riding bikes.
Okay.
It's not unusual.
Okay. So he offered to give you a ride and you accepted it
Correct.
because you had some friends that you were meeting up with later.
Correct.
And so you and Gareth walked out the back of his residence,
Yes.
and there's like a long flight of stairs that lead through the yard and lead to the detached garage.
Yes.
And his vehicle was in the detached garage,
Yes.
and it was a red Lexus.
Yes.
And so did he open, if you recall, did he open up the garage door with him, or did you go into the garage and he went out front by himself?
I don't remember.
Okay. So then you both did get in the car
Yes.
and he drove out of the garage.
Correct.
And as you both were driving out of the garage, what happened?
We were blocked in by several cars, and I wasn't really sure what was happening. I think they were normal looking cars. And then I think a police car showed up at some point, and then they started telling him to get out of the car.
Did they tell both of you to get out of the car?
They asked him to get out first.
And how did they ask?
Objection,
Sustained.
Did you see any guns drawn?
objection, relevance.
I'll allow the answer. I think that one witness already testified that there were the guns. Did you notice any guns drawn?
I don't recall, honestly.
Was it scary for you?
Very.
Relevance.
I'll allow the answer to stand.
Could you repeat your answer?
Very.
Did Gareth say anything to try and reassure you?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said,
Objection, hearsay.
just do what they say.
And did you see Gareth get out of the car?
Yes.
And how was he able to get out of the car?
Through the passenger window or door or window, I can't remember, but and then he got face down on the ground.
And was that according to the instructions that were being yelled at him?
Yes. Yes.
And the instructions were yelled at him by officers?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll stand. All right.
I'm sorry, it will
It'll
stay.
stand. Go ahead.
And then after Gareth got out of the car, did you have to get out of the car too?
Yes.
Were you instructed to also lay down on the ground?
Sustain.
Did you lay down on the ground?
Objection.
Sustain.
Did you see Gareth taken away in handcuffs?
I don't remember. I saw him in the back of a car. I don't recall if it was in handcuffs.
This was a frightening experience for you?
Yes.
Sustain.
Well, Your Honor, she made a statement to detectives afterwards, and I think her state of mind is important.
I think, why is your state of mind important? We can talk about that sidewalk, but that's not, but she's already answered previously that it was a scary experience. I'll let that stand.
So you then went, how is it you came to talk to any detectives?
A police officer sat me down on the sidewalk. He wouldn't tell me what was happening. He said, wait for the detectives for your questions. And then a couple hours later, 2 detectives came and talked to me.
So you sat on the sidewalk for 2 hours?
I don't recall exactly how long, but it was a while, yes.
And then where were you while you spoke to the detectives?
I was in their car.
Was it still on that street where the arrest was conducted?
No, we drove, I think, to the impound to get my bag that was in the car, in Gareth's car.
Okay, so the officers drove you to retrieve your personal property from the car that had been impounded.
Correct.
So you went to the tow yard to do that, and you were having a conversation on the way.
Correct.
Now, when you say you saw scratches on Gareth's face, where did you see the scratches?
I don't recall exactly. There were a couple on his neck and face, if I remember correctly.
Do you remember what side of his face they were on?
I want to say the right side of his face.
Do you remember how many you saw?
Maybe 3 or 4.
Can you describe the scratches? Were they scabbed? Were they welts? Were they red? Any way?
They were red.
They were red? Can you describe how long the scratches were?
Maybe a half inch.
And you don't know how many there were?
No.
Would you say it was more than 2?
Didn't she say 3 or 4?
3 to 4?
Was that your answer?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
Okay. And all on the right side, as far as you can recall.
yes.
And so those 3 to 4 were all either on the face or on his neck?
Yes.
Do you recall what Gareth was wearing that day?
I think he was wearing orange basketball shorts, and then he changed.
What was he wearing a t-shirt?
Yes.
A short sleeve t-shirt?
Yes.
And basketball shorts.
Yes.
And that was while you guys were organizing the apartment?
Correct.
And then he changed before he drove you home?
I don't recall when he changed, but yes, that sounds right. At some point he changed from what I saw him in.
Okay. Did Gareth tell you whether or not he'd ever fired a gun before?
I think he said he'd never fired a gun before.
And do you have experience with firearms?
Yes.
And is that something you had told Gareth about?
Yes.
And had you ever suggested to Gareth that you guys go to a firing range?
Yes.
But on this particular day, Gareth suggested that.
I believe so.
Did that surprise you?
Not particularly.
Did he tell you why he wanted to go to the firing range?
I think it was in.
Did you ask him why he wanted to go to the firing range?
No.
Were you aware that Gareth's father had died recently?
Sustained.
Do you recall Gareth telling you he had a shoulder injury?
Sustained.
Did you ever notice there was a shoulder injury that Gareth had sustained prior to February 15th?
Sustained.
After Gareth, did you see Gareth taken into custody and driven away in a police vehicle?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll let the answer stand. I believe she said it yes previously.
And so you still remained at that location after Gareth was taken away.
Yes.
Did you observe his demeanor during the arrest and transportation away from this location?
I'll allow the question to be asked. Did you observe his demeanor?
Yes.
Okay.
How would you describe it?
Calm.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Any regret?
Just briefly.
All right.
Ms. G, you were asked a series of questions about the defendant's place, and you had responded that he was working on the actual apartment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did he tell you what he did for a living?
Yes.
Did he do construction?
Sustained.
Was he in construction?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
Well, the first question you had asked about whether he was in work is his home. That's different, and I'm a sustained objection the way this question is posed.
Did he tell you what he did for a living?
Yes.
And what was that?
So sustained.
Admission by party opponent, Your Honor.
So I'm sorry.
What he told her he did for a living, admission by party opponent, Your Honor.
I understand. Let's approach here. Well, again, no speaking objections. Is that correct? If you stated it that way, if it's not correct, I'm sure this witness will correct you. So,
Is that correct?
I'm sorry. What's that?
Sure. Did you have two separate conversations with law enforcement on that day?
Yes.
One was by the curb, is that correct?
Correct.
And one was in a car on the way to get your personal belongings.
Correct.
Now, your conversation with detectives was recorded, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, when you were speaking with detectives, did you ever bring up your conversation that you had with the defendant in regards to going to a shooting range that day?
I don't think so.
You were asked on cross-examination whether the defendant ever indicated to you whether he had fired a gun before. Do you recall those questions on cross-examination?
Yes,
Did that ever come up in your conversation with detectives?
I don't think so.
When did that ever come up?
Not at all until I spoke with the defense.
Did Mr. Pursehouse indicate to you that he was dating other women during the time that you were seeing each other in that few-week period prior to Valentine's Day?
Objection beyond scope and irrelevant.
No, the film was done in cross-examination where there was a breakup with the prior relationships. I'll allow that.
But this is regarding currently.
Currently, did you say? No, at the time that they were
That's correct.
together, I guess. Not allow it.
He did not say he was seeing anybody else.
Did you assume that he wasn't seeing anybody else during that time?
Yes.
Thank you, nothing further.
Okay, anything?
Did the conversation about going to the firing range happen between you and Gareth?
Yes.
And you recall that?
Yes.
You didn't make that up to tell the defense?
No.
Thank you, nothing further.
Anything based on that one question? Nothing?
I'm sorry, and it just, defense brought that up with you, not yourself, is that correct?
They asked me about it, and yes, I confirmed.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Nothing?
Nothing further.
All right, you may step down. Thank you. Let's call on the witness. If you would.
People call Dr. Neil Benowitz.
We'll take our break at 11, ladies and gentlemen. You can put it on that chair, sir, if you want. All right, if you're going to approach the witness, stand down here, please, sir. And before you have a seat, you can raise your right hand.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do. Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Neil, Neal, and Benowitz, Benowitz.
All right, Neil.
Thank you. Please tell the jury what it is that you do for a living.
Well, I am a professor emeritus in medicine in the Division of Cardiology at San Francisco General Hospital. I'm an employee of the University of California, San Francisco. I practice medicine. I practice cardiology and medical toxicology.
You practice,
And I run a research laboratory.
you said you practice cardiology
Yes,
and medical toxicology.
correct.
And you also run a laboratory?
Yes, I've got a research laboratory that I've run for many years, but it's basically studied nicotine and tobacco.
When did you obtain your medical license? Approximately.
1971.
Do you have a license, a certified license as American Board of Internal Medicine?
Right, so that's a board certification. That means I've had training and then been qualified in internal medicine.
What's internal medicine?
That's sort of non-surgical medicine. So any medical illness that does not involve surgery. So heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, any of those diseases are internal medicine.
And have you had that certification since about 1974?
Yes,
And are you certified under the American Board of Medical Toxicology?
yes.
What does that mean?
So the toxicology has to do with drugs or chemicals that cause injury. So like a drug overdose or a side effect of a drug or an industrial spill. Medical toxicology is a specialty of physicians who diagnose and treat people with medical toxicology problems.
And have you had that certification for that American board since about 1981?
Yes,
And do you also have a certification for the American Board of Clinical Pharmacology?
yes, I do.
What does that mean?
Well, pharmacology is the science of how drugs work. Clinical pharmacology is a medical specialty where people do research on drugs, develop new drugs, study harmful effects of drugs. So toxicology is sort of a subset of clinical pharmacology.
In 2019, did you receive an award for the PLOS biology? That's PLOS biology, top 0.01% of scientists based on impact.
Yes, I did.
And what does that mean?
Well, that award is based, well, first, researchers publish papers on the research in medical journals. And then other researchers in the field may cite these in their own articles as sort of a background for their own papers. The citation index, so the 0.1%, is a measure of how many other researchers have cited your papers. And so my citations are in the top 0.1% of researchers.
Are you known as one of the world's experts on pharmacology and toxicology of nicotine?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, most of my research field has been studying nicotine and tobacco. Actually, that started from my involvement in pharmacology and cardiology, because when I started doing research in the late 70s, early 80s, 40% of people smoked, and smoking was the primary preventable cause of premature heart disease. So that's why I started studying nicotine as a way to prevent heart disease.
What year was that approximately?
Late 1970s, early 1980s.
Okay.
So in my career, I've
Thank you, Turtle Gang. I appreciate that so much. Guys, it's not playing. I don't know why. It just stopped playing. Let's see. 1:23. I think it's because they might have ended. What the hell? Mm-mm.
you can buy.
That's PLOS biology, top 0.01% of scientists based on impact.
Yes, I did.
And what does that mean?
Well, that award is based, well, first, researchers publish papers on the research in medical journals. And then other researchers in the field may cite these in their own articles as sort of a background for their own papers. The citation index, so the 0.1%, is a measure of how many other researchers have cited your papers. And so my citations are in the top 0.1% of researchers.
Are you known as one of the world's experts on pharmacology and toxicology of nicotine?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, most of my research field has been studying nicotine and tobacco. Actually, that started from my involvement in pharmacology and cardiology, because when I started doing research in the late 70s, early 80s, 40% of people smoked, and smoking was the primary preventable cause of premature heart disease. So that's why I started studying nicotine as a way to prevent heart disease.
What year was that approximately?
Late 1970s, early 1980s.
Okay.
So in my career,
I is doing this. I have no clue doing this. Oh my gosh. 201.44. Wow. I am so sorry
Would it refresh your recollection?
about this. They are still we're going to sell
and boil it to make a tea, and then
nicotine.
concentrate it down. So that's another way that can be made. That's not, you won't see that on the internet, but at one time you could find sort of ways to do that on the internet. Next slide. So now I want to talk about how much nicotine is in a cigarette, what a smoker gets, and then how much is in pure nicotine liquid. So first, one tobacco cigarette contains 10 to 15 milligrams of nicotine. A milligram is 1,000th of a gram. It's a very, very minute amount. A smoker, when they smoke, takes in 1 to 2 milligrams. Most of the rest of it ends up in secondhand smoke, in the air, or ends up in the tobacco rod itself. But a smoker takes in 1 to 2 milligrams. Now, I said that a milligram is a small amount. So 1 milliliter, which is like 1/5 of a teaspoon, weighs 1,000 milligrams. So that's how small 1 milligram is. So if you took 1 milligram of a pure nicotine liquid, you would have 1,000 milligrams. So that's 1/5 of a teaspoon contains 1,000 milligrams, which would be equivalent to smoking from 500 to 1,000 cigarettes.
Then I can just stop you there for a second. Looking at People's 24A. Do you remember the amount of liquid in the syringe for item number 21?
It's my understanding that it was 1.5 milligrams.
1.5.
Oh, no, 1.5 milliliters.
Right. So now going back to your slide. So that would be more than the 500 to 1,000 cigarettes.
Right. That would be from like 750 to 1,500 cigarettes. Next slide. So then the question is, how much nicotine does it take for someone to die of exposure? And this has been studied. It's very difficult to do experiments, obviously, in people. The way this has been done, and this has been published in medical articles, is to look at levels in people after they die in their blood or their body tissues. And then from studies like mine, where I give nicotine to people, they can say this amount of nicotine in someone's blood after they die is equivalent to them taking in this much nicotine. So the estimates, and this is from the most authoritative article that talked about this, is that taken by mouth, if you're exposed to 1 to 13 milligrams per kilogram body weight, by mouth, that would be potentially lethal. Or injected, when you inject it, it's more potent because when you swallow something, the body breaks it down before it gets to the bloodstream in part. When you inject it, it goes 100% into the body.
1 kilogram, that's about 2.2 pounds.
1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds. Yeah, so a 70 kilogram person weighs 154 pounds. That's the translation. And so by injection, it's estimated that 4 to 5 milligrams per kilogram would be a lethal dose by injection. Next slide. So in this case, again, this is a syringe. So there's 1.5 ml of liquid.
And this is the syringe we're talking about in this case, which these photographs, the top photograph, is that a photograph taken by Dr. Maureen Bradley as part of her report? And is the photograph at the bottom a photograph that was provided to you from the crime scene?
Yep, that's my understanding.
Okay.
So Dr. Alan Wu, who is a colleague of mine, did the analysis and found that there was 86.9% nicotine, so it's almost pure. There's a brown color, so pure nicotine is clear. It's a clear liquid, but with time, some of it breaks down. Some of the breakdown products are a little bit brown, so that's why cigarettes can cause like brown teeth and whatnot.
Can exposure out on a balcony to the conditions on, let's say, on a balcony, air, what have you, can that, may that change the color of the liquid?
Yeah, but it can occur just with storage in syringe too. So if we go back to the syringe, so 1.5 ml would contain more than 1,300 milligrams of nicotine. Next slide. So then to figure out, what was that dose if Miss Harwick was exposed to that compared to what we know as potentially lethal levels. So Miss Harwick weighed 130 pounds, which was 59 kilograms.
There were different estimates as to her weight, right? Some would be 118 and some had her at 130 pounds.
Okay, well, I'm estimating the higher weight, which would be more conservative in a sense.
Correct.
For the amount. So if we say that the syringe contained 1,300 milligrams of nicotine, this is 22 milligrams per kilogram. That would be the dose that she would be exposed to. Even if she was injected with only a third of it, with half a milliliter of nicotine, with 434 milligrams, that would be 7.4 milligrams per kilogram. These are both well above the potentially lethal dose of 4 to 5 milligrams per kilogram. Next slide. So it was my opinion, and written in my report, that with a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that the amount of nicotine found in the syringe on the bedroom balcony of Miss Hardwick's apartment would likely have been lethal had it been injected into her body. Next slide.
Now, how would the general public find out, or is there information for the general public out there where they can find out information about using nicotine to kill someone? You can answer that.
Yes, so there's actually quite a bit. This is from an article written in Wired magazine in 2012.
What is Wired magazine?
That's like a tech magazine. It's widely available, and you can get this article on the internet. You don't have to even subscribe to it. And this sort of gives the history of nicotine as a chemical that had been used in murder since the 1850s. And makes a point, which is important, that nicotine has been used because it's very hard to tell. There's no specific findings at autopsy that says someone's poisoned with nicotine.
Obviously, does your training experience give you the knowledge to be able to make that conclusion?
Yeah, basically, a person just stops breathing, and there's no specific findings that say what caused you to stop breathing. And toxicologists in coroner's offices don't screen for nicotine. It's a common substance, and so it's not screened for.
Do you know that for a fact that the coroner's office does not screen for that?
Yes, unless there's some suspicion that someone asked them to.
How do you know that, sir? That the coroner's office is not something that's usually screened for nicotine?
I've just spoken with coroner in San Francisco, and it was my impression that it was not screened for in this case.
Okay. Overruled.
So anyway, this is something that was been well known. This article explains it. And then there have also been a number of television shows that you can watch that talk about nicotine that's been used in a murder scene. So in 1991, there was a Columbo episode where nicotine was used in a murder.
Well, I think this witness, and we'll move on from that area, but this witness is speaking about the information I take it is readily available.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's move on if you would.
And you mentioned that without mentioning specifics, but there are other programs and shows that are out there for the public where nicotine has been shown to be used to commit murder.
Yeah, all you have to do is basically search the internet and say TV shows, nicotine murder.
And what is your fee? Well, first of all, your current position right now is as a professor of clinical pharmacology at the University of California, San Francisco, correct?
Yes.
And what is your fee for testifying as an expert? Well, first, what do you charge to look into a case, examine it, look at the reports, and write a report regarding your analysis?
$700 per hour.
And how many hours have you dedicated to this case?
I've 5 hours prior to coming to this trial.
And you've written a report too,
Yes.
correct? And does it include travel plus 3,000 for half a day of testimony?
Right. That's billed the same way. Yes.
I have nothing further on.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Fenwick.
Good morning.
I want to try to get you out of here before lunch or earn you another $3,000 for a half day this afternoon. So the LD50 that you testified to this morning, you testified that it was 4 to 5 milligrams per kilogram, right?
Correct.
And that the liquid in the syringe in this case, you calculated to have 1,303 milligrams of nicotine, and that was based on Dr. Wu's work.
Correct.
Your calculation, that would be enough to be an LD50 for somebody who weighs up to 260 kilograms, right?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, sorry,
Let me rephrase.
you said you calculated that there are 1,303 milligrams in the syringe that was found in this case.
Yes.
So that amount of nicotine in the syringe, calculating it through your LD50, would be enough to be fatal for somebody who weighs up to 260 kilograms.
So basically, it's I don't have a calculator, but it really would be dividing 1,300 by 5.
So about 1,300 by 5.
Or 4 or 5.
So it's around somebody up to that weighs about 500 pounds.
Right.
Roughly. So the amount of nicotine in the syringe found in this case would likely be fatal to somebody who weighs up to about 500 pounds based on your LD50, right?
Yes.
So it is your opinion that injecting what was in the syringe would have been fatal to Ms. Harwick, right?
Correct.
And so it would have also been fatal had it been injected into Mr. Pursehouse, right?
Objection, foundation, and calling for speculation.
Overruled, unless he knows the weight of well, if you establish foundationally, assuming someone weighs this much.
Assuming he weighed less than 500 pounds.
Yes, it would.
You can do gas chromatography mass spectrometry on many different kinds of samples, right?
Yes.
Unknown liquids, for example.
Yes.
Blood,
Yes.
urine.
Yes.
And it can be used to determine the levels of nicotine and cotinine in these kinds of samples, right?
Correct.
It's a very specific analysis and very sensitive.
Yes.
Many laboratories use this procedure. GCMS.
Yes, they do.
It's been around for a long time, right?
Yes.
You actually published a paper in 1981, improved gas no matter how many times I say it, improved gas chromatographic method for determination of nicotine and cotinine in biological fuel. That was a paper that you and I think of.
Can you repeat that?
Sorry. Improved. Actually, I'm going to let you, I don't know if you have that memorized, but improved gas chromatographic method for determination of nicotine and cotinine in biological fluids.
Very good.
That was a paper of yours in 1981.
Yes.
So, it's been a very reliable method with some help from you, it seems like, in your work, to determine the presence of nicotine or cotinine in a sample, right?
Yes.
Pure nicotine is clear.
Correct.
When it oxidizes, it turns brown.
Correct.
And oxidization, that's a process of breaking down, to kind of put it bluntly, right?
Yes.
And you published a paper in 2009 that looked at the different metabolites of nicotine, and the paper is titled Nicotine Chemistry, Metabolism, Kinetics, and Biomarkers, right?
Yes.
And in that paper, you explained that nicotine is extensively metabolized to a number of metabolites, right?
Correct.
And that there are 6 primary metabolites.
Correct.
Cotinine is one of them.
Correct.
And this breakdown, it can just occur naturally over time, right?
Talking about outside the body,
Yeah.
it occurs very slowly. This breakdown very slowly. So it can take months or years for it to extensively break down.
And a lot the rate of it breaking down there are many factors that can affect the rate of how quickly it breaks down, right?
Well, are you talking about storage as liquid or in the body?
Liquid storage is as a liquid.
Yeah, it depends how much oxygen is there. So if you put it into a container with no oxygen and you put it in a freezer, it basically stays stable forever. But if there's oxygen in there, like some air, that can slowly break down.
Yeah, so there's things like if it's in a freezer versus a cabinet, if it's in a hot room versus a cold room, all of those are different factors that can affect the oxidization and breakdown of nicotine, right?
Yes.
Now, seeing pyridine in a GCMS test of a sample that also includes nicotine and cotinine, that would make sense, right?
I'm not understanding your question.
Okay, if you do a GCMS analysis of a sample and it comes back indicating nicotine and cotinine,
Yes.
also seeing pyridine would make sense, right?
No, check beyond the scope.
I'll give you some movement.
Not to my knowledge, our analyses basically, we're looking at blood just shows nicotine and cotinine if we're doing that assay. So I'm not sure it might depend on the assay, but I'm not familiar with that.
But you are familiar with pyridine alkaloids, right?
Yeah, so nicotine is basically a pyridine-based alkaloid.
Okay, right. It's a nitrogen-containing chemical compounds that are widely found in plants, right?
Yes.
And that contain a pyridine ring,
Yes.
right? And you talk about that in your paper on the different metabolites of nicotine, specifically that oxidization of the pyrrolidine ring. Nicotine is metabolized by 2 non-oxidative pathways, methylation of the pyridine nitrogen, giving nicotine. And so you mentioned pyridine as being associated with nicotine, right?
Yeah, but pyridine is just a chemical structure.
Okay. And then last chemical specific question. benzanamine, which is also known as aniline. Seeing that in a GCMS test of a sample that also includes nicotine and cotinine also makes sense, right?
It depends on the analysis. Like I say, our assays would not pick up aniline.
Okay.
Ours are very specific for nicotine.
Okay, so it depends on how it's done.
Correct.
Now, let's assume that someone obtains nearly pure nicotine in liquid form. It could take a very long time to break down, right?
Yes.
So I'd like to briefly talk about injection routes to be specific. So there are 3 most frequently used injection routes, and that's intravenous, intramuscular, and subcutaneous, right?
Yes.
Intravenous is into the vein.
Correct.
Intramuscular is into the muscle through the skin and subcutaneous tissue.
Correct.
Subcutaneous is a short needle that injects a drug into the tissue layer between the skin and muscle, right?
Correct.
In terms of how quickly the absorption rate is, depending on the injection route, intravenous is the fastest.
Yes.
Intramuscular is the next fastest.
Yes.
Subcutaneous is the next.
Correct.
And oral is the slowest.
Correct.
And even if you just look at one of those injection routes, the rate of absorption can vary depending on what part of the body the injection occurs at.
Well, for IV, it doesn't matter very much, but for IM and subcutaneously, yes.
And then it's not like there's some uniform exact absorption rate that all human bodies obey, right?
Well, from intramuscular absorption, it's pretty consistent from person to person. For subcutaneous, it's more variable because it depends on how much fat a person has and how constricted their blood vessels are. So it's pretty consistent for IV. It's relatively consistent for intramuscular and more variable for subcutaneous.
Whether somebody's on a medication or what gender they are, those are also factors that can affect absorption, right?
Yes.
Let's now, even for phlebotomists, correctly doing an intravenous injection in a therapeutic hospital type setting is not necessarily easy, right?
Correct.
And that's why that's why phlebotomists have to go to school and get trained for that, right?
Yes.
If nicotine is injected, say subcutaneously, that's going to cause a burning sensation, right?
Most likely, yes.
Injecting it directly into a vein would also cause a burning sensation.
It depends on where. If it's a large vein, it might not very much. A small vein probably would.
And the more nicotine that's injected, the more painful it would be.
Yes.
If someone were to be injected against their will, they would likely struggle.
Probably, yes. I would think so.
And if somebody were injected under those circumstances, you would expect to see hemorrhaging beneath the injection site, right?
Injection foundation and
He said that he ended his last response by saying, "I think so." That's speculation. So let's move on, if you would.
All right. If there's not like a clean injection, then you would expect to see hemorrhaging beneath the injection site, right?
injection foundation, common for speculation.
I don't know. Are you able to answer that?
Well, it's a sort of a common sense thing. It depends how much trauma there was. So if you inject someone very quickly, and then you might not see very much at all. If the needle is in the skin while the person is moving around, you would see more. So it just depends.
Bruising as well, you would expect to see in a setting or in a situation where the injection is not like you're not sitting in a hospital room and it's not being administered. You'd expect to see bruising as well.
Objection, foundation.
State.
Mr. Avila went over all of your board certifications, right?
Yes,
And you're a professor and a doctor.
yes.
Do you have the foundation to answer the question that I asked you?
Again, counsel, it's not relevant unless you relate it to facts. If you expect to see, and I think of prior responses, it depends on how much the person struggles and how long the needle is in the body. If you inject somebody very quickly, I believe the doctor said you wouldn't expect that. If the needle is in the body, coupled with the struggle, you're going to see some hemorrhaging or at least some bruise or
Right.
contusion.
All I asked was, and
And he answered that.
that you would see some bruising.
Yes, he answered that. Yes, so it depends. It depends on the circumstance.
I thought you sustained Mr. Avila's
But-
objection.
But you've already got an answer to that.
Are you familiar with the International Journal of Legal Medicine?
I have read a few articles from that journal.
It's a peer-reviewed journal, right?
Yes,
And it's a reliable, peer-reviewed scientific journal.
yes.
So, are you familiar with the case study that they published in February of 2019 that looked at a autopsy of a woman who had injected herself with nicotine to commit suicide?
Objection, foundation assumes facts, not an evidence.
Well, I don't know. Is it a foundational question?
This is evidence code 721, Your Honor.
I know, but is it a foundational question?
Yes.
All right, I'll give you some leeway with respect to that. Are you familiar with that, sir?
You know, I probably have read it, but I'm not familiar offhand with it.
Okay, but the publication, the International Journal of Legal Medicine, you said was a reliable, peer-reviewed scientific journal, right?
Yes,
Okay. So, in this case study, the title of the case study, it's actually
Object is hearsay.
Well, it isn't if it's prepared and if you have an expert on the stand, they can rely on hearsay or hearsay statements prepared in a report to make a conclusion or render an opinion. So go ahead.
So in this case report, evaluation of the distribution of nicotine intravenous injection, an adult autopsy case report with a review of literature. The authors discussed how a 19-year-old woman was brought into the hospital.
Object as to hearsay.
Let's approach it, if you would, please.
What you would likely see around an injection site if the injection occurred during a struggle. So it would be pretty much impossible to do a clean intravenous injection against a person who is struggling, right?
Just as big as the clean.
Well, do you understand what he means?
I assume with no bruising, and yes, it'd be,
Okay, you can answer.
yes, it would be difficult.
And in those kinds of circumstances, the injection would likely end up being intramuscular.
It could be.
There would also be an injection mark.
Most likely.
You testified on direct that many toxicology drug screens do not include a screen for nicotine.
Correct.
Now, pretty much every modern lab in major cities in 2020 were capable of ordering tests that would detect nicotine in a blood sample, right?
I don't know the number, but certainly many labs can.
Such as a gas chromatography mass spectrometry test,
Yes,
or a neutral and acidic drug screens on a blood sample.
they can. It depends. There are many different sort of manufacturers that screen for different things. So I'm sure some do. I'm not sure all do.
And that Wired article that was part of your PowerPoint presentation that discussed a case from 1850 in that article, they talk about how a chemist actually in 1850 did find the nicotine in the tissue of the person, right?
Right, but that was an extraordinary case. That was before nicotine was actually characterized as a drug. And he basically took tissue and just a different extraction, basically extracted an oily substance. And then that oily substance was found to be nicotine. But that's not what laboratories do now.
Right.
That was the first case ever.
Right. But the point is that in 1950, a chemist was able to test the tissue and find nicotine.
Yes.
Did Mr. Avila or Ms. Mariano provide you with the gas chromatography mass spectrometry test of the liquid that was in the syringe that was done by the Los Angeles Police Department?
No.
In your PowerPoint on direct, you included in one of the slides and you testified that the amount of liquid in the syringe was 1.5 milliliters.
Correct.
And wasn't the LAPD report actually 1.4?
I don't remember. It could be. I don't remember that.
Now, if I may have a moment. You testified on direct about how you were part of a case where somebody used nicotine against another person.
Yes.
And you also testified that someone could learn about nicotine as a potential murder weapon through an internet search.
Yes.
And you also mentioned somebody in the public, a member of the public, could learn about that from stories in the media, like the Wired article we were talking about.
Yes.
Now, isn't it also true that an internet search for nicotine suicide would immediately show that ingesting or injecting nicotine has been a way that people have been attempting and committing suicide for a very
Compound. Ingesting and injecting.
for nicotine suicide would also immediately show that people have been ingesting nicotine to commit suicide for a very long time.
So I know that was true. I don't know. I haven't searched that recently to know if it's been taken off. But at one time, if you went to a suicide website, nicotine was one of the options.
Now, I Googled nicotine suicide. Can I show you it?
Sure.
You can just look at both pages and look up when you're done.
Yes. There are quite a few articles.
So the front, yeah, of course. The front page or the first results that come up include things like the suicide hotline, but it also includes links to studies and reports and examples of people committing suicide with nicotine, right?
Injection compound.
All right, rephrase.
The search shows that the first, main results show that people have been using nicotine for suicide, right?
Right. Well, these are mostly reports of people who have used nicotine for suicide.
And it also links to the Wikipedia page about nicotine poisoning, right?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the nicotine page or the Wikipedia page about nicotine poisoning?
I have not looked at that.
Okay. So you wouldn't know that it references nicotine suicide in multiple
Injection
places.
foundation.
I don't know. Are you able to answer that, sir?
I've not looked at the Wikipedia page.
Okay, sustain.
But you are aware that people have been using nicotine to commit suicide for many, many decades, right?
Objection has to answer.
Yes, sustain. You stated yes. Where the
And you have read published articles in science and health journals about people all over the world using nicotine to commit suicide, right?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
This is
352.
a completely
It's the
different
same.
question.
No, it isn't. You're going national versus international.
No, this is about about whether he's read articles, the published articles and case studies in health and science journals.
352.
Okay, have you?
Yes, the handout you showed me were basically case reports, many in science journals about
Okay.
suicide.
So your answer is they're in there.
Yes,
Okay. In this particular case, you relied on an article by Bernd Mayer.
correct.
And the title of that article is How Much Nicotine Kills a Person, Tracing Back the Generally Accepted Lethal Dose to Dubious Self-Experiments in the 19th Century. Right?
Correct.
And in this particular paper, Mr. Mayer discusses a suicide attempt where someone ingested 4 grams of pure nicotine, right?
Yes,
And that was a suicide attempt in 1931.
I don't recall the year, but
Would it refresh your recollection to look at the paper?
sure.
Do you have a copy?
Yes.
Mr. Avila?
Yes.
This is going to be paragraph 2 on the first page.
Yes,
Does that refresh your recollection, sir?
yes,
And so this was Mr. Mayer cited an article by, I believe, a German fellow, Schmidt, from 1931, Nikotinvergiftung, Selbstmordversuch. So, nicotine poisoning.
That'll report.
Oh, every bit, would you like to hear that?
And so this paper that you relied on for, coming to testify here in this case discusses this nicotine or the suicide attempt from 1931, right?
yes,
And he also, Mr. Mayer in this paper also writes or discusses how there are reviews on fatal nicotine intoxication caused by either suicidal intent or accidents, right?
yes,
Mr. Mayer, in his references a 2010 paper, 2 UK suicides using nicotine extracted from tobacco, employing instructions available on the internet. Are you familiar with that paper?
yes,
That in that paper, they discuss how 2 individuals read instructions online and figured out how to dilute or how to extract nicotine from tobacco, right?
yes,
And one of those suicides was, I believe, in 1992.
Is that correct?
I don't recall the year. Could be.
Okay. Another reference in the Mayer paper is death due to ingestion of nicotine-containing solution. Death due to ingestion of nicotine-containing solution. Case report and review of the literature by Solarino et al. Are you familiar with that paper?
Yes,
And this paper discusses multiple documented suicide attempts using nicotine as the method of suicide, right?
yes,
Are you familiar with the paper Near Fatal Intoxication by Nicotine and Propylene Glycol Injection, a case report of an e-liquid poisoning? This was published by BMC Pharmacology and Toxicology in 2019. Are you familiar with that paper?
I'm not sure. I'd have to see the paper.
I don't have a copy of that paper.
I'm going to give you one right now.
Thank you.
Sorry, thought I had it here. It might be a moot point. Are you familiar with that paper, sir?
I think I've seen it before. I don't know the details of it, but it certainly makes sense to me what they report.
Well, if you're not familiar with it, I can't really ask you in detail about it. Do you happen to be familiar with the paper Fatal Suicidal Attempt by Deliberate Ingestion of Nicotine
Section
Containing?
352.
Well, I'll let him get into some other papers and or articles, but then I'm going to grant the 352.
Okay, I only have a few more.
Okay.
Well, I have a lot more, but I won't ask about them. Are you familiar with the paper Fatal Suicidal Attempt by Deliberate Ingestion of Nicotine-Containing Solution in Child Onset Depression Mediated Through Internet Suicide Guideline, a case report? This was published in the Indian Journal of Critical Care Medicine in 2020.
Can I be provided a copy?
Counsel.
Yes.
Thought I had everything.
It'll take me a second just to find it. I have it right here. Are you familiar with that, sir?
You know, I've read many different papers, and I just, without looking at the abstract to know what's in the paper, I can't tell you if I specifically can describe that study.
May I approach?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not specifically aware of this paper, but you know, it's one of many of that sort.
Last one I'll ask about before moving on to another topic. How about the emerging method of suicide by electronic cigarette liquid, a case report, 2016. And this is in the Journal of Korean Medical Science.
Objection Foundation, assumes facts not in evidence, and 352.
Well, I'll allow him to finish this last inquiry with respect to this particular paper. But that's under 352, I'm going to grant the objection after this question.
Let me give you a copy.
Are you familiar with that article, sir? Doctor?
I have not read this article before. No.
Okay. Okay.
So suffice it to say, there are many, many published case reports and papers on individuals going back as far as the 1930s who have attempted or successfully committed suicide using nicotine.
Yes. And
These have been published in reputable, peer-reviewed scientific and medical journals.
Yes.
Let's talk about LD50. So the definition of an LD50 is if the amount in that LD50.
Just for the jury, LD meaning lethal dosage, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. I should have started there.
Yeah.
So 50 means if that dose is administered, half the population would perish and half would not.
Correct. That it was really derived from animal studies of toxicology. It's hard to tell in humans because no one ever gives people doses and see when half of them die.
That would be highly unethical, right?
Yes.
Thank God we don't do that. I mean, even animal studies have their own set of ethical concerns, right?
Correct.
And you use the word estimate. You estimated what the LD50 is. There's no consensus among the scientific community about what that is, right?
But it's difficult to be definitive about it. Again, the way scientists have tried to figure it out is by looking at levels of nicotine in people's body when they die, and try to say how much nicotine would they have had to have taken to achieve those levels. And then you get a span of different amounts for different people. And based on that, they estimate what a potential lethal dose is. I think that's the best one can do.
And so in this case, you had to kind of rely on the Mayer paper, which talks about an oral LD50, and then estimate from the oral LD50 to what an injected LD50 would be, based on how the body processes and the differences between oral absorption and intravenous absorption.
Correct.
And you were talking about how you can't really run studies on humans. And so the science and health communities have to rely on these case studies, which are real life incidents that get reported.
Yes.
And in the case of nicotine, the most frequent types of case studies are accidental ingestion, right?
Yes.
Workplace exposure.
Well, workplace exposure is different. That's usually with tobacco harvesting.
And suicide attempts is the other common category.
Yes.
Now, on the 25th of July at 10:30, you were interviewed by Deputy District Attorneys Victor Avila and Catherine Mariano over Zoom, right?
I don't recall the date, but I will certainly have been interviewed by them.
And a detective was also present, right?
I don't recall.
That was not recorded, was it?
I don't think so.
You ended your direct examination by saying that your opinion is with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
Correct.
You're familiar with ANSI, ANAB, right? ANSI, I'm not sure. You're familiar with ANSI, ANAB, right?
Remind me what.
And in that conversation, you learned that Miss Harwick, her account had a setting where it only retained video for 5 days.
I don't recall the exact number of days, but that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection to look at a declaration from a Google custodian of records?
Yes, that would be very helpful.
I just need a moment.
All right.
Yes.
Still opening. Just a second. Sorry, I'm having just a brief technical issue.
Okay, so let's move on to something else. Maybe you'll find it after.
All right.
Okay. So you were having this conversation with this Google employee on February 21st, 2020, and this Google employee communicated to you that what you would likely see around an injection site if the injection occurred during a struggle. So it would be pretty much impossible to do a clean intravenous injection against a person who is struggling, right?
Just as big as the clean.
Well, do you understand what he means?
I assume with no bruising, and yes, it'd be,
Okay, you can.
yes, it would be difficult.
And in those kinds of circumstances, the injection would likely end up being intramuscular.
Could be.
There would also be an injection mark.
Most likely.
You testified on direct that many toxicology drug screens do not include a screen for nicotine.
Correct.
Now, pretty much every modern lab in major cities in 2020 were capable of ordering tests that would detect nicotine in a blood sample, right?
I don't know the number, but certainly many labs can.
Such as a gas chromatography mass spectrometry test,
Yes.
or a neutral and acidic drug screens on a blood sample.
They can. It depends. There are many different sort of manufacturers.
Thought I had everything better.
It'll take me a second just to find it. I have it right here. Are you familiar with that, sir?
You know, I've read many different papers, and I just, without looking at the abstract to know what's in the paper, I can't tell you if I specifically can describe that study.
May I approach?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not specifically aware of this paper, but you know, it's one of many of that sort.
Last one I'll ask about before moving on to another topic. How about the emerging method of suicide by electronic cigarette liquid, a case report, 2016. And this is in the Journal of Korean Medical Science.
Objection foundation, seems facts not in evidence, and 352.
Well, I'll allow him to finish this last inquiry with respect to this particular paper. But that's under 352, I'm going to grant the objection after this question.
Let me give you a copy.
Are you familiar with that article, sir? Okay.
I have not read this article before.
Okay. Okay.
So suffice it to say, there are many, many published case reports and papers on individuals going back as far as the 1930s who have attempted or successfully committed suicide using nicotine.
Yes.
And these have been published in reputable, peer-reviewed scientific and medical journals.
Yes.
Let's talk about LD50. So the definition of an LD50 is if the amount in that LD50.
Just for the jury, LD meaning lethal dosage, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. I should have started there.
Yeah.
So 50 means if that dose is administered, half the population would perish and half would not.
Correct. That it was really derived from animal studies of toxicology. It's hard to tell in humans because no one ever gives people doses and see when half of them die.
That would be highly unethical, right?
Yes.
Thank God we don't do that. I mean, even animal studies have their own set of ethical concerns, right?
Correct.
And you use the word estimate. You estimated what the LD50 is. There's no consensus among the scientific community about what that is, right?
But it's difficult to be definitive about it. Again, the way scientists have tried to figure it out is by looking at levels of nicotine in people's body when they die and try to say how much nicotine would they have had to have taken to achieve those levels. And then you get a span of different amounts for different people. And based on that, they estimate what a potential lethal dose is. I think that's the best one can do.
And so in this case, you had to kind of rely on the Mayer paper, which talks about an oral LD50, and then estimate from the oral LD50 to what an injected LD50 would be, based on how the body processes and the differences between oral absorption and intravenous absorption.
Correct.
And you were talking about how you can't really run studies on humans. And so the science and health communities have to rely on these case studies, which are real life incidents that get reported.
Yes.
And in the case of nicotine, the most frequent types of case studies are accidental ingestion, right?
Yes.
Workplace exposure.
Workplace exposure is different. That's usually with tobacco harvesting.
And suicide attempts is the other common category.
Yes.
Now, on the 25th of July at 10:30, you were interviewed by Deputy District Attorneys Victor Avila and Catherine Mariano over Zoom, right?
I don't recall the date, but I certainly have been interviewed by them.
And the detective was also present, right?
I don't recall.
That was not recorded, was it?
I don't think so.
You ended your direct examination by saying that your opinion is with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
Correct.
You're familiar with ANSI, ANAB, right? ANSI, I'm not sure. You're familiar with ANSI, ANAB, right?
Remind me what they mean. I'm not sure. If you tell me the names, I could give you what they stand for.
That is the board. Let's see. I think I have it here. Don't have it memorized. It's the board that publishes best practices for courtroom testimony. It's also the organization that publishes the international standards for lab accreditation.
And no, those are not really in my area, so I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, then it's not really even worth asking you about. I have nothing further.
Okay. Any redirect?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me just sit down and I'll give it to you right now. Unless it's right. I think it's right here.
Well, that's happening. Yes. Council asked you about a Google search he conducted about fatal suicide. Looking here with nicotine.
I didn't publish it.
Well, I'm publishing it. But we can make this people's next exhibit.
All right. You're at 70.
70A and B. Is this his Google search that he showed you
Yes,
about articles regarding suicide with nicotine?
yes.
And in what he showed you, does it show anywhere how people are committing suicide with nicotine?
Well, the case reports describing what people did.
Right, but in this document that's provided to you, and I'll bring it up to you, does it show how people are using nicotine to commit suicide?
Well, if you read the articles, you would see.
Right, but you didn't get to read those articles, correct?
Correct.
So you don't know how people are committing suicide with nicotine.
Well,
You mean by ingestion versus
Injection.
swallowing and
Right.
so forth?
yeah, well, from what I have read about this, it's not commonly by injection. It's usually by taking it orally or putting on patches.
Right, so let's say he asked you a question about defendant Pursehouse, if this dosage would be able to kill him. Does he have to inject it to kill himself with that dosage? Or can he take it orally?
Well, it takes much more orally for two reasons. One is that most people vomit when they take it orally, so they vomit up a lot of it. And the second thing, as we discussed before, is the liver metabolizes a lot of it before it even reaches the bloodstream. So only about 30% reaches the bloodstream. So you have to take much, much more orally. It's much harder to kill yourself orally by injection.
But that's assuming he would know how this whole thing would work out for him.
Yes,
So many of the suicides are committed by ingesting nicotine orally,
yes,
not piercing yourself with a needle.
correct.
I have nothing further.
Anything based on those questions?
Yes, there are plenty, if not dozens, of published studies and case studies and reports of people injecting themselves with nicotine. Right.
I don't know how many there are, certainly some.
We're not referring to this at the time. Are you familiar with the case report out of Japan, the 19-year-old woman who injected herself in the arm?
I'm going to object to hearsay to this specific fact pattern in 352.
Okay, you have in your studies and publishing, you have read case reports and articles where people injected themselves to commit suicide.
Yes. To that.
Okay.
Is that correct? Doctor?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But it's your testimony that those are the minority of suicide attempts, that the majority are through ingesting either a liquid or something else?
Correct.
Anything?
No.
Thank you, Doctor. You may step down.
Thank you.
Hey, call your next witness.
Then people call Mr. Michael Sewell.
All right. Sir, if you could raise your right hand, please.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the possible opinion before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
My name is Michael Sewell. That's Michael Sewell.
All right, counsel.
Thank you. What do you do for a living?
I'm a senior criminalist with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
What are your duties as a senior criminalist?
Right now, I'm assigned to the forensic biology section as well as the CSI section.
And how long have you been a senior criminalist?
I believe somewhere around 2015, so 8 years.
What's your background training experience that qualifies you to be a criminalist?
I received my bachelor's of science degree in chemistry from the University of California, San Diego. I received my master's of science degree in criminalistics from Cal State LA. I received internal training on the identification and detection of bodily fluids, as well as the analysis and interpretation of DNA. And then most recently, the documentation and collection of crime scene evidence.
Now, as part of your duties, were you assigned to examine an item of evidence associated with LAPD case number, DR number 20060606220?
May I refer to my notes?
If that would refresh recollection?
It will.
Yes.
You said the last 5 digits were 06220?
Yes.
Yes.
And was that item number 34 that you were assigned to examine?
One moment, please.
Looking at your notes, refresh recollection, this is the item number
Yes.
with the court's permission?
Yes.
Yes, it has a number 34 written on the outside of the envelope. When it came to our sheriff's department, it got a new item number, and it was item number 1.
And why is it that once it arrived at the sheriff's department for your examination, that it received a different number?
The number's different just because we're 2 different agencies. So we only received this item for evidence. So underneath this case, there's only 1 item. It gets number 1.
At this time, remember, the people are holding 2 photographs of an envelope. May that be marked as people 71A and B? Or actually, yes.
Yes. And you'll attach them together, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
I'm showing you what's been marked as people 71A, which appears to be the front of an envelope, as well as 71B, which appears to be the back of an envelope. Do you recognize these 2 pages?
Yes.
And how do you recognize them?
I believe I was the one who photographed that or copied that envelope.
And is this the package in which the evidence was received by you in order to conduct your examination?
That's correct.
When did you receive this particular item of evidence?
August 3rd, 2023.
And when did you actually conduct the analysis of that item?
The analysis of the item started on August 16th and was completed on August 17th.
Now, what item of evidence did you actually receive inside of this envelope depicted in People 71?
It was 1 swab that was yellow and gray in color.
And was that a swab of possible urine as it was reported to you?
Yes.
What kind of analysis did you conduct on this particular item of evidence?
It is standard for our urine analysis to conduct a semen analysis and then a urine analysis. We conduct the semen analysis to make sure that we can rule out semen because it has some similar components that also appear in urine. So we want to rule out semen in order to give a conclusion about urine.
Could you explain the process of your analysis and making your determination first about semen and then about urine?
Yes. So for semen, I use a black light to see if there's any fluorescence on the swab. If there is, I will use a color test that's a little bit more specific for semen. If that is also positive, in this case it was, I will then move on to a microscopic examination for sperm heads. If I do not find any sperm heads, I did not in this case, I move on to my last test, which is a P30 test. P30 is a fluid that shows up in moderate amounts in seminal fluid. I ran a P30 test, and it also came up negative. So I determined that semen was not detected in this item.
After you determined that there was no semen detected in the item, did you then proceed to conduct an analysis in regard to whether there was urine?
Yes.
And could you explain that process?
That one's much simpler. I simply extract the swab, and then I spot that extraction on filter papers. I then use 2 color tests on it, one that detects urea and one that detects creatinine, 2 common components of urine. And if both of those components are present, there's a color reaction. And if both of them are positive, I conclude that urine has been indicated.
Now, just to be clear, are you able to make a determination as to whether this is human urine or that of animal urine?
I am not.
You're just able to establish that the sample itself contains urine.
Yes, urine is indicated.
And in this specific sample, you detected urine?
We say urine indicated because there are some substances that we have to take into account and possibilities in order to make sure that we cannot fully rule out the presence of these other substances. That's why we say urine is indicated. It is our best conclusion that urine is there. We can't say for sure.
So in the specific item number 34, or as labeled by the Sheriff's Department, item number 1, urine was in fact indicated in that swab.
Yes, and indicated is our strongest conclusion, our strongest positive conclusion. We just do not say detected.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Just briefly. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Does it hurt your neck to turn this way?
No, I can do both.
Okay. I just have a few questions.
Okay.
I want to follow up on your last statement, that it's the best conclusion your lab can reach as to the determination that urine is indicated. Is that correct?
Yes, it's what I was trying to say. It's the strongest. It's the most positive. So there isn't a urine detected that we just didn't get to. It's urine indicated is our best conclusion. We have other conclusions for if we urine inconclusive or urine not detected. But I was trying to be clear that urine indicated is as high as we go.
Do other labs do additional tests to confirm presence of urine that your lab did not conduct?
Objection, speculation.
Right. I don't know. It's a general question. Are there other labs that could conduct examinations at your lab?
There might be, but I would be speculating.
Okay, then it's the same.
So you indicated that you cannot tell whether this was human urine or from an animal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if there was a cat in the home, you could not exclude the cat from the donor of this urine that was swabbed and received by the LASD.
That is correct.
Also, you did not do any DNA analysis on this urine. Is that correct?
No, I was strictly told we are receiving this item for urine analysis and urine analysis only. LAPD was handling all the DNA.
Okay. And so that meant that you could not determine any type of DNA typing from the urine to determine who the contributor of the urine was. Is that correct?
That is correct, but it is our policy that urine cases are separate from DNA cases. We do not determine DNA on urine cases. They would have to be 2 separate items of evidence or 2 separate tests.
And the testing that you did, when you ruled out the presence of semen to make sure that you weren't testing semen, that testing is not conclusive to determine that the source of the urine came from a female as opposed to a male. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question? I think I understand, but could you do it one more time?
The testing you did you cannot say with scientific certainty that urine that you tested came from either a male or a female. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything?
No.
You may step down. Thank you.
Pop Detective John Lamberti.
All right. You're at 72 next one.
72?
Yes. Detective Lamberti, if you would approach the witness stand here, please. And raise your right hand.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
So, see. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
John, John, Lamberti, Lamberti.
What is your occupation and your current assignment?
I'm a detective with the Los Angeles Police Department. I'm assigned to West Bureau Homicide.
And how many years have you been a police officer?
14.
How many years have you been a detective?
Almost 8.
Out of those 8, how many years have you been assigned to the homicide division?
7.
I want to draw your attention back to February 16, 2020. Well, actually, let's go back. February 15, 2020, were you one of the detectives involved in investigating a death that had occurred at 2086 Mound Street?
Yes.
And as part of your investigation, the next day on February 16, 2020, did you have a search warrant issued for some Nest cameras at 2086 Mound Street?
Yes.
And were photographs taken of the barcodes in the back of each of those cameras?
Yes.
And did you attach those to your search warrant and have that signed by a judge?
I did.
And then was that search warrant then sent to Google, who owned Nest camera at the time, to see if there was any records related to this camera?
Yes.
And on February 21, 2020, about 5 days later, did Google email you a link with videos that they had in that from your search warrant?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have a DVD with this by People's number 72. It contains 8 video clips. Did everybody mark the 72?
Yes.
All right. Now I'm gonna show you some of these video clips and ask you if these are the records that were returned to you by Google. First, if we could, before we play them, do you remember when Google sent you these 8 video clips from the Nest camera, were they all from one particular camera?
Yes, they were.
And here showing you, I think it's clip number 1, and we're going to identify it by looking at the top left corner, the year 2022, February 5th. I believe that means February 5th. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah, 2020-02-05. And then
is the time 21:51? Is that UTC time?
I don't know if that's local time or UTC time.
In any event, this appears to be a camera inside the living room area.
Correct.
And are all the 8 video clips from that living room area?
Yes, they're all from that one camera.
And are all of the clips, except for one for the date of February the 5th?
I believe so.
Okay, I'm going to play just this one for now. That's as the date of February 5th, 2020. And this video clip is about 16 seconds long. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you familiar with these type of Nest cameras?
Yes.
Is that typical that they will is 16 seconds an amount of time that they would typically record if they're activated by motion?
Objection, foundation. Well, I don't know. Are you able to answer that question?
I can speak generally, having downloaded video from many different surveillance systems. That's a typical behavior of surveillance systems that are activated by motion.
Okay.
Now, if you could just.
These are images of the victim's home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Are all these video clips showing the living room within 2086 Mound Street?
Yes.
And are all of them with the date? If you could look up, are you able to see the dates on all the video clips?
Yes.
Are all of them from February 5th, except for one?
Yes, all except the last one, which is February 13th.
Let's click on February 13th, the last one. We're playing that right now. Do you see, let me stop here. Do you see the time on this? It says the year 2020, February 13th, and then 7:20:36. Do you know what kind of time that is?
That looks like it's probably 7:20 in the morning because the other clips were in 24-hour time. So my assumption is that they're being recorded in 24-hour time. So that would be 7:20 in the morning.
And did it appear that there was like, I don't know if it was some part of a spider web or string that may have activated the camera?
It appeared,
Sustain.
What did you see something in front of the camera moving?
yes.
What did that appear to be?
I thought it was a spider web.
In this particular clip, does it look like it's nighttime?
It's hard to tell because the lights are off. So all I can tell you is that it's dark inside.
Are the French doors there, are the curtains open?
They do appear to be open, yes.
And, what does it look like outside, if you're able to tell?
It seems like it might be dark, but these infrared cameras are notorious for giving off false color images. So it's really hard to say.
In any event, did Google send you any video clips for the date of February 14th, Valentine's Day, or February 15th?
No.
And do you know why this was able to be saved, these particular clips?
I can speculate as to why.
Well, we don't want you to speculate. So, no. But in any event, these are the ones that they sent you.
Correct.
And you did not check the victim's phone to see what, if any, Nest videos were on that phone.
We weren't able to get into her phone, so no, I wasn't able to check.
Well, you were not able to get into the phone at a particular point in time.
Correct.
You don't know if other detectives were able later on to get into her phone.
That I don't know.
Nothing further on.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Actually, I'm gonna leave these over here. So, Miss Harwick's phone was recovered from 2086 Mount Street, right?
Yes.
And on the 9th of November 2021, Detective Carranza signed out the cell phone and gave it to you, right?
Yes.
And you took it to the Orange County Regional Computer Forensics Laboratory on the 16th of November, right?
That sounds right. Yes.
And it was in possession of the lab until it was partially and fully downloaded in 2022.
Correct.
And then you picked up the cell phone and gave it to Detective Carranza on the 6th of December in 2022.
Yes.
And that phone was extracted eventually by the Orange County Regional Computer Forensic Laboratory, right?
That's my understanding. Yes.
And the reader of the extraction is called Celebrate, right?
Celebrate. Yes.
And Celebrate generated a report.
Foundation, as to this witness?
Well, I don't know. Do you happen to know, or would you be?
I do know. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Celebrate. Well, the technicians would have generated a Celebrate report from the raw data extraction.
And you reviewed that Celebrate report.
I did not look at that Celebrate report. No.
isn't it true that you were the examiner on a Celebrate report for the voicemails on this phone? Would it refresh your recollection? To look at
It
the
might,
report?
yeah.
Can I approach?
Yeah.
If you can just look at the examiner name.
I can't tell what phone this is from because I did look at some other phones. So just looking at that report, I can't tell what phone that's from.
You can tell that it's an Apple iOS, right?
Right.
And that your name is in the examiner name row, right?
Yes,
And it's for this case, right?
it is. Yes.
Do you recall reviewing the report for Ms. Harwick's phone that had all the voicemails on her phone?
Objection foundation.
Well, he said, does he recall? Did you look at them?
I don't remember if I did or not. I look at hundreds of phones, but if my name's on it, then I probably looked at it. Yeah.
I have the complete report. The one I just showed you was just an excerpt from it. May I approach?
Yes.
So this has all of the files that were in this report.
Oh, I can tell you why. So I originally got the raw data extraction from the Orange County Forensic Lab. I took the phone myself to try to open it up using their computers, and the file was so big. I let the program run over the weekend. I left it there on a Friday, came back on a Monday, and the Celebrate reader still hadn't opened up the file because it was that big. And so I took it off and gave it to Detective Carranza, and he took it to our lab where they did the extraction. But because I initially started the download, that's why my name is on it.
Okay, so even though it says you're the examiner of this report, you didn't examine the report.
That's correct. Yes, it's left over from when I initially opened up the Celebrate program to do the download or generate the report. I would put my name in, and so that part of it stuck, but the actual report didn't run. So I gave it to Detective Carranza, someone else extracted it.
Based on your background, training, experience, and working with this lab in Orange County, do you believe that that report that has your name on it and that I showed you is accurate?
Objection foundation.
Do the people have an objection for me introducing something that was generated from the extraction on
This
this?
witness, yes.
Okay. I would like to introduce one of the voicemail from this exact report that has his
I
name.
understand, but it has to be through the appropriate.
Okay, all right.
Whatever she means.
All right. So I'd like to talk about your background, training, experience a little bit. You have been a sworn peace officer for the Los Angeles Police Department since July 2009, right?
Correct.
You were promoted to detective in November 2015.
That's right.
And you've been lead investigator in hundreds of investigations, right?
I have.
You've been in a position of homicide detective since November of 2016.
Correct.
You are, I believe, are still assigned to the West Bureau Homicide, right?
Yes.
And you have written and served hundreds of search warrants for physical locations, and many other things like vehicles, people, cell phone records, internet records, and business records, right?
I have.
And you have extensive hands-on experience in the recovery and preservation of evidence, including cell phones, computers, and digital video recordings.
Yes, I do.
You're familiar with preservation requests.
Yes.
A preservation request is a request that law enforcement sends to an entity that may have records or other evidence in their possession.
Yes.
A preservation request would compel the recipient of that preservation request by law to preserve a copy of records or other evidence in their possession.
That's right.
Relevance
This is
and overbroad as to
It's
which.
sustained. You describe your process, so yes.
Okay.
Sustained.
In this case, Detective Carranza sent preservation requests to Instagram and Twitter.
Protection Foundation.
No, is that a question? Did you?
No, does he know, to your knowledge, you
Personal knowledge.
you worked in this case. You're aware. Are you aware that Detective Carranza sent preservation letters to Instagram and Twitter?
I don't. I'm not. I don't know that.
Okay, so let's talk about the warrant to Google regarding these Nest cameras. You were the I never know how to pronounce this. Affiant, the affiant for the search warrant.
Affiant, defiant. I think either way.
All right, you were the affiant.
Yes.
That means that the law enforcement officer signing the affidavit of probable cause for the warrant, right?
Yes.
And that affidavit included your belief at the time about the possible evidence at issue.
Yes.
Your beliefs at the time that you put down into your affidavit were based on
Protection relevance.
Well, let him finish his question.
were based on investigation that you and others had done up to that point in time.
Right.
And the affidavit was under oath, right?
Yes.
So you believed at the time that Miss Harwick's residence had this security camera installed, right?
Yes.
That this Google Nest system is a system manufactured by Nest, which is a subsidiary of Google.
Yes.
That Nest sells a variety of smart home products that can be controlled through a user's smartphone
Yes.
using the Nest app.
Yes.
That Nest security cameras continually upload video and audio to their cloud.
They have the capability. Yes.
And depending on the plan that the user subscribes to, up to 30 days of video can be stored and accessed using the Nest app.
All right, under 352, the court then imposes some objection at this point. I take it as the applicant to the search warrant were seeking a footage of the video recordings from particular days. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, you were provided certain days,
Correct.
but not the, what was it, 13th and 14th or 14th and 15th?
14 to 15.
Okay, all right. Let's move on, Council.
So you specifically requested all footage between January 17th and February 15th, right?
That's right.
For 4 cameras, right?
Correct.
And you believed that because there were notifications from the Nest app on her phone, that these cameras had recorded something.
That's what I believed at the time. Yes.
And that these cameras were discovered installed in various locations throughout the house,
Right.
showing the interior and exterior of the property.
I believe it was both interior and exterior. Yeah.
And it was your belief at the time that the cameras almost certainly captured audio and video of the events leading up to Miss Harwick's death.
When I wrote the search warrant, that's what I believed. Yes.
And so once the search warrant was signed by the judge, you uploaded that to the LERS portal.
The Google law enforcement portal. Yes.
And that's where they accept legal service of legal demands, right?
Correct.
It's a portal that you have an account, you can log in and upload a document, right?
That's right.
And you uploaded that warrant on the 16th of February.
I did.
And on February 21st, 2020, Google responded with a letter, right?
A letter and 8 videos.
And you reviewed the videos that same day.
Yes.
You saw that there were no recordings from the February 14th or February 15th.
I did notice that. Yes.
And then you called Google to ask if there was a problem with your warrant.
I called Google to see why I only got 8 random videos when I was under the assumption that they would have been recording, more often.
So you also emailed them on the 21st of February, right?
I believe so, yes.
And you had a conversation with somebody who responded to your email.
Right.
And in that conversation, you learned that Miss Harwick, her account had a setting where it only retained video for 5 days.
I don't recall the exact number of days, but that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection to look at a declaration from a Google custodian of records?
Yes, that would be very helpful.
I just need a moment.
All right.
No. May I approach?
Yes.
Still opening. Just a second.
Sorry, I'm having just a brief technical issue.
Okay, now so let's move on to something else. Maybe you'll find it after.
All right. Okay. So you were having this conversation with this Google employee on February 21st, 2020, and this Google employee communicated to you that they completed their search based on the search warrant on the 21st of February.
Yes.
And that when they completed that search,
No, object as hearsay. Unless that's a business.
Yeah, just ask the direct question. If you're asking him about particular days we're missing, or is that complete? Just allow me to ask that question, even though technically it's hearsay.
okay, that they produced the responsive data that was in their possession, right?
Right.
But because this 5-day retention period had lapsed, there was no way for them to know if there was anything that was recorded by the cameras on the 14th or 15th, right?
That was my understanding.
Now, within the way that this account works is that within that 5-day period, the account holder has the option of being able to select recordings and save them, right?
That's my understanding.
And that anything not saved by the account holder would be deleted.
Right.
Now, you previously have you told detectives. Let's see. Let's go through this in chronological order. So, we're going to jump forward to 2021. On September 27th, 2021, you wrote Google an email. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you, in this email, you indicated that you had submitted a search warrant and that Google had responded that there were no responsive videos, right?
Right.
And so you were reaching out to Google again, and you were representing to Google that you hadn't paid attention to the last page of the letter where the zip file was, right?
Right.
And so you were telling Google, hey, back in February of 2020, I didn't get anything.
I think, yeah, I might have been confused as to what I had been in possession of.
Then on October 4th, 2021, you wrote an email to Detective Carranza, Detective Masterson, Mr. Avila, and the other district attorney at the time, Mr. Dreiling. And you said that you emailed Google and asked why you hadn't received the file that they referenced in the letter, and that this time they attached the files.
Yes.
And you wrote in that email on October 4th, 2021, unfortunately, because Amie didn't have a subscription plan, it looks like it only contains a few files that she saved manually.
Right.
Okay. So that's not entirely true, right? She had a plan that had a 5-day retention period.
I don't know whether she had a plan or my understanding from Google was that she didn't have a paid plan.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at the declaration by the Google custodian
Yes.
records?
Okay. May I quote, Your Honor?
Yes.
So you can just scroll down as you're reading.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So did that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
And Google informed you that she had an account that had a 5-day retention period.
That's what it seems to say in that letter, yes.
So that's what they told you in that conversation, right?
He says that's what it seems to say, Counsel.
In the letter.
Are you saying that that was not communicated to you in the conversation?
I don't remember.
That's hearsay.
Okay, sustain.
So on October 4th, 2021, when you emailed the 2 detectives and the 2 district attorneys, you knew that you had received files from Google, right?
I think I had forgotten that I had received them and then somehow had lost track of them, which is why I requested them again.
And when you emailed Google, you knew that you had this conversation with this Google employee and that they had provided these files.
Objection, hearsay.
Yes, it's sustained. And I think he just stated he thinks he may have forgotten that he received them. Is that right? And you were reaching out to them again.
Correct. I
All right.
believe I forgot that I received them.
All right.
Now, Detective Masterson testified at the preliminary hearing and was asked about this exact issue, right?
Objection, hearsay and foundation.
Sustained.
This is prior inconsistent statement, Your
It
Honor.
says sustained, not from another witness, unless it's attributed to that particular witness.
In preparation for his
That's approach.
as I was saying, did you talk to Detective Masterson about this issue prior to Detective Masterson's testimony at the preliminary hearing?
Regards to this issue?
This issue being,
The Google Nest, subpoenaing Google for the Google Nest videos.
I had many conversations with Detective Masterson about the videos, yes.
And you told Detective Masterson that Google had not sent you any files.
If that's what he testified to, then
I'm gonna object this.
yeah, and not only that, he's already stated that it was his belief that he had not, but it could have been that he forgot that he had. That's not inconsistent. If he's denied, I never received anything, he stated, I may have forgotten that. And so I reached out to them again.
He testified that he got files
But
and then
still,
you know,
Go
a
ahead.
year and a half later said that he didn't get any files. That's
I
the
understand that,
inconsistency.
no, but he's already explained it. He said I may have forgotten, and that's his explanation.
So you just forgot, right?
yes.
Okay.
Save it for argument later.
All right. The exhibit with the videos. Yeah.
Okay. It's in the.
Can I just put this? All right, so I'm opening up the file from the 13th that appears to be from the 13th of February. What? Let's try this. Okay, so I'm gonna hit pause and just put on the record what I'm playing. So this appears to be a file with a date of February 5th, 2022, or sorry, February 5th, 2020. And it has audio, right?
I can hear audio, yes.
We'll go back to the beginning. So this video that we just finished watching captured both video and audio, right?
Yes.
And the angle of the video is to the front door, right?
Right.
And then the French doors that are illuminated right here, I hit pause at 14 seconds, are the doors that the prosecution is alleging that Mr. Pursehouse entered through on the night of the 14th, right?
Yes.
And you said that Google Nest videos are typically 16 seconds long?
No.
Okay.
So
So
I
they,
said that's not out of the ordinary for a motion activated clip to be 16 seconds long, but they can be any length depending on how much motion was in the video.
got it. So if there's motion in the video, it'll record, and then if the motion stops, it'll stop recording.
That's how motion activated video works, yes.
Hitting play. Now, so from that 14-second, I can't see the time stamp on this, whether it shows or not, but from the 14-second mark where I stopped, the motion, the people that were in the frame had gone out of the front door, and then the camera kept on recording for another roughly 14 seconds, right?
Somewhere in there, yes.
You didn't send a preservation request to Google for Nest recordings when you sent them the search warrant on February 16th, 2020.
No, I sent them just the search warrant.
To your knowledge, no one involved in investigating this case sent a preservation request to Google for the Nest recordings.
No.
And in February 2020, U.S. law enforcement officers could submit a preservation request to Google, which would require them to preserve a copy of records or other evidence.
Yes.
Nothing further.
You're correct.
The very next day of when this incident occurred, you sent Google your search warrant for those 4 cameras, is that correct?
That's right.
And they received it on February 16th.
They received it as soon as I uploaded it. Yes.
I have nothing further.
You guys have those 2 questions.
I would just like to mark the 2 emails that I previously showed.
Make it double T.
My objection would be hearsay.
Well, he's not moving to admit them at this point. Double T 1 and 2.
All right, so I'm gonna give a copy to the people, each email. And just so the record's clear, I want to put on the record which is which. All right, so officer, I'm showing you an email dated September 27th of 2021.
Yes.
And I marked that as TT1. And this is the email to Google indicating that there were no responsive records when they had replied to the search warrant previously, right?
Right.
Now, TT2.
Object is hearsay, constitutes reading the email.
All right, you can just give the date. And you're familiar with this, officer?
Yes.
Okay, I'll at least as a descriptor, you can.
And then October 4th, 2021 is TT2. And that's the email to Detectives Carranza Masterson and Deputy District Attorneys Avila and Dryling,
Yes.
indicating that you would not receive the files. And lastly, I'd like to admit the email from
When I admit, Mark.
Mark. So this would be TT3. This is the email that you sent on February 21st, 2020 to Google, indicating that you had received files and reviewed them. Is that correct?
Right.
Does that look like, do you recognize that email?
Yes. That's I wrote that email.
And that is TT3.
Yeah.
Nothing further.
Anything?
On this last email, you're saying on February 21st, 2020, that you're reviewing videos that you received.
Right. That's what I was trying to explain is in September or October of 21, when this issue came up again, I had just forgotten that we had gotten those videos because they were insignificant and they just forgot that we had them.
I have nothing further.
Okay. You may step down.
Thank you.
People call Detective Vinton to the stand.
Right. All right, Detective, you can raise your right hand, face my clicker.
solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and cause documented before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Dave Vinton, DAVEVINTON.
All right, Mr. Avila, who's inquiring?
I am.
Okay.
Please tell the jury what is your occupation and current assignment.
I'm a detective for LAPD and I'm currently working homicide.
I'm going to ask you just to speak just a little bit louder so all the jurors can hear you. And how many years have you been a police officer?
For 29,
How many years have you been a detective?
for about 18,
And out of those 18 years, how many years have you been a detective that investigates homicides?
about 15.
I want to draw your attention to the date of February 15, 2020. At any point, did you go to the location of 2086 Mount Street in the Hollywood Hills?
I did.
Okay, and there was a crime scene there.
There was, correct.
Okay, that was related to the death of Dr. Amie Harwick.
Yes, it was.
And at some point the following day, did you receive information to go to an address for an individual by the name of Gareth Pursehouse?
I did, yes.
And was this an address in Playa del Rey?
Yeah, I believe it was 8148 Cordova in Playa del Rey.
Is it Cabora, Cabora Drive?
Correct.
And at about what time on February 15, 2020, did you get to that location?
Sometime in the evening, early evening hours.
And prior to, what's the process when you go into someone's home and you're about to search it? Well, first of all, was it done pursuant to a search warrant?
It was, yes.
So once you have the search warrant and you go into the home, what's the process to searching a home?
What we do is take photographs prior to, and then we'll assign detectives certain assignments for photos, for collecting the evidence and searching the location, and we'll take photos afterwards.
And are photos taken of, like, let's say, the door, if there's a living room, if there's an outside patio?
Yes, good overall photos.
And is it true that sometimes you don't know if a location is relevant or not? You know, if it's relevant or not relevant to your case, you take photos anyways.
Correct.
And if you see an item of evidence, it may be relevant, it may not, a photo is taken sometimes.
Yeah, and if we were to recover, we take a photo. Correct.
I'm going to reference certain photos for certain items that were located there. Were you present when certain property was recovered from 8148 Cabora Drive?
I was, yes.
Okay, and you were told that that's the address for Gareth Pursehouse.
Yeah, he had resided there.
Were you there when he was arrested that day?
I was there afterwards.
Did you see him?
No.
And how many officers conducted the search of his residence?
I think there were about 4 of us.
I'm going to show you a series of photographs of items recovered at that location and ask you if you recognize them. You want to have a 2-page document with a PI6 at the very top corner showing some what appears to be some tennis shoes. May this be marked people's next in order?
73, is that 2 photographs?
Yes, 73A and B.
Yes, all right.
Looking at this PI6. And by the way, does PI stand for property item number?
It does, yes.
And was at some point, were these shoes given a property identification number 6?
Yeah, it's just a way to track the shoes as they're booked into evidence.
And just because the jury hasn't heard this, what does that mean, property identification number?
Basically what it is, it's a way to track and document the evidence that's taken from a home on a report.
And so the property ID number 6 for these particular tennis shoes, would it be, it's property item number 6 for DR 2006062220.
Yeah, and it means basically it'd be the 6th item that was booked to that report number.
In this particular case, that was the DR number for this particular, for any evidence recovered as it related to this case.
Correct.
And so property item number 6 was a pair of tennis shoes.
Yes.
And what were they found?
In the bedroom closet of the residence.
And is that shown here on 73A?
It is.
And looking at 73B, is that a close-up of those tennis shoes?
It is.
And were these designated as the brand DC with a tan with black laces?
Yes, they were DC brand tennis shoes.
Now looking at PI, the photograph with PI 7, may this be marked people's number 74.
Yes.
Do you recognize what's shown here?
Yes,
What is that?
those are shoes that were recovered in the bedroom closet as well. Yellow Adidas, and they were booked under item 7 under that same DR number.
And do you prepare a property report where you list the items that are being recovered at a specific location?
Yes,
And you did say this is property item number 7. You describe it and you indicate if there's a brand to it and the color.
correct,
And was that done in this case?
correct.
And at the point you're recovering this, you don't know if these shoes are relevant or not.
No,
Do you remember where these shoes, where they were recovered?
yeah, from the same closet as the previous shoes.
But we don't have a photograph of them in the closet. Do you know why?
No, I don't. It was taken. I don't know why.
I have another series of photographs. I mean, this remarked as people's number 75 shows some other shoes.
Yes.
A and B, and it has a PI 8 at the very top of 70, top right corner of this photograph of 75A. Do you recognize what's shown there?
I do.
And what is that?
It's photos of shoes that were recovered from the closet as well from the residence.
And was this designated property item number 8
Correct, number 8.
and described as white shoes with white laces?
Yeah, white shoes. I don't believe there was a brand associated with them, so they were just labeled white tennis shoes.
Looking at photograph B, is this a close-up photo taken at a different point in time?
Yeah, looks like it's a closer up of the same shoes.
Okay, let's, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break, if you would, please. Back on the record, counsel.
Right, looking at photograph 75B, we showed a close-up of those white tennis shoes.
Yes.
I have 2 other photographs showing some shorts. May this be marked people's next in order, people's number 76. Thank you.
There are 2.
Yeah, 76 A and B.
Yes.
And the top right corner has PI number 9. Do you see that there?
I do.
And can you describe what the jury's seeing on that photograph?
So the dark colored shorts is what I had recovered from the bathroom floor that we had booked into evidence.
And was that identified as property item number 9?
Correct.
I'm going to show you 76B. This is a close-up of those shorts.
It is.
Okay, and they appear to have some white stripes on the side.
Yeah, I think they're gray, but yeah, stripes on the side, yes.
I have 4 photographs. This remarks people's next in order, people's number 77.
Yes. A through D.
Yes. And at the top of 77A, there's a PI 10. You see that there?
I do.
And can you tell me, you tell us what's shown there?
That's a pair of gloves that I had recovered from the living room closet at the residence.
And was this designated property item number 10?
It was.
And was the brand Husky?
Husky, yes, correct.
And you described them as tan gloves?
Yes.
Looking at photograph 77B is just a close-up of one of the gloves.
It is.
And looking at photograph 77C, is that a close-up of the two gloves?
Yes.
It appears to be tan. Would that be the top of the glove, the tan parts?
Yes, correct.
Looking at photograph D, would this be the bottom of the glove?
The palm side is black, yes.
And was a syringe found at the defendant's residence?
Yes.
Can I have a series of 3 photographs and this be marked people's next in order?
78 A through C.
Looking at people 78 with a PI 13 there. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
That's a syringe that was recovered from the kitchen cabinet of the residence.
Was it in one of the drawers?
It was on the shelf.
And looking at photograph 7B, is that a close-up?
It's a close-up of the same syringe.
And on your property report, was it designated where exactly in the apartment it was found?
Yes.
And how was that described?
I believe it was in the kitchen shelf at that address.
And did you also describe it as a plastic syringe with yellow residue, unknown narco?
Yeah, it appeared to be some type of residue in the syringe itself.
And the brand, do you see the brand there?
Yeah, EXE, EXEL, XL, I believe.
Yes. And I'm going to show you a photograph of 24A. This is a different syringe. Let's see if the brands appear to you to be similar. Let's see. I'm not going to be able to place it, but I'll show you one at a time. That's the syringe from defendant Purshouse's residence. with
Yes,
XL,
correct.
with the yellow.
Yes, correct.
Now I'm going to show you another photograph, 24A. Does that appear to have the same brand?
It does. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we took it, because I knew there was a syringe.
No response to any.
Oh, it's just a,
Well, what was the significance of collecting that syringe in defendant Purshouse's residence?
Because it was similar to the syringe that was found at the victim's residence.
Thank you. And were all these items booked into evidence under DR number 2006-06220?
They were.
And can you tell the jury, what does that mean, booking the evidence?
Well, that's basically, we use that report number to track the evidence itself, and anything that were recovered that we designate as evidence, we have to book it into our property where it's maintained.
Where's that? Where was this property taken to?
To 1130 South Vermont in Olympic Division.
And that's where it was booked into evidence?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
cross-examination.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Detective Vinton.
Afternoon.
So when you first arrived at 8148 Cabora Drive, was that at about 17:35 hours?
Yeah, I think it was in the evening time. Sounds about right.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at your notes?
It sounds about right.
Okay. So when you first arrived, did you first speak with a woman, and I'm not going to use her last name, we're not using it. First name Angeli, last initial G.
I did.
All right. And did you take a statement from her with another detective?
I did. It was myself and Detective Fretlore had interviewed her.
Okay. And how long had you been a detective at that time?
Probably 15 years, probably.
Okay. And you prepared a report memorializing your conversation with Angela G.
Yes,
And when you prepared that report, you realized the investigating detectives were going to be relying upon your report and preparing their reports. Is that correct?
I mean, the we call them the IO investigating officer. They're, they get the report, but it's, it would be good practice for them to actually listen to the interview that's recorded, and they could document a supplemental report if need be or add on to the statement. But my statement is pretty brief statement of what she told me. Yes.
Did you review your statement before testifying today?
No, I did not.
Did you review the video recording of your interview of Angela G?
No.
Okay. Do you recall having a conversation with her?
I do. I did review her transcript
Okay.
of the interview.
And do you recall specifically asking her whether she noticed any injuries on Gareth Pursehouse?
I did, yes.
And do you recall that she told you that she noticed he had a black eye, but she did not ask him what happened?
Yeah, she had mentioned to me that she had seen or saw that he had a black eye.
And that she had not asked him how he got that black eye.
Correct.
And she did not tell you that she saw any scratches on Mr. Pursehouse. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yeah, where in the transcript did she say that I did not ask him about the black eye, that he had a black eye? Do you want me to bring it up to you?
Sure.
I think it was, he didn't ask him how he got it. Was the question, wasn't it?
Right. I think what counsel said is that she told the detective that she never asked Gareth Pursehouse how he got the black eye. And so what I'm asking is, I'm showing you page 6, where it says one time he had the black eye, and I may be missing it, but where in the transcript does it say that she told you that she never asked Gareth Pursehouse about how he got the black eye? You take your time with that. Or did she just say he had a black eye?
Yeah, I think she just mentioned that he had a black eye.
So she never told you, I never asked him about where he got the black eye.
Right. It just never came up.
By the way,
I'm going to object to that and then you move to strike.
Oh, I'll allow the answer to stand. You said that never came up?
Correct.
Okay.
by the way, in your whole interview with her, did she ever mention to you that defendant Pursehouse told her that day that he wanted to go to the shooting range? Did she ever say anything about that?
No, she never mentioned any shooting range.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Bernstein.
Yes. Detective Vinton, when you were interviewing Angela G, where were you?
We were in my police car down the street from the residence.
And were you parked?
Yes.
You weren't driving her to the tow yard?
No, we were actually stopped at the tow yard.
During the entire conversation, you were actually stopped, or were you driving during a portion of it?
I think for the most part, we were parked outside the tow yard waiting to get her car out of tow. But yeah, it was in the car.
You haven't listened to the audio recording. Is that correct?
No, I haven't.
So you can't say what quality it was?
Quality, I think, is fairly good from what I remember.
Well, Mr. Avila just showed you a transcript, correct?
Yes.
And was it page 5 of the transcript he showed you?
6, I believe.
Which transcript did you show? Okay, well, I'm looking at it. Showing you the approach. Showing you the same transcript on page 6. What is typed after her words when she said one time he had a black eye?
So for the line 13, the next word is inaudible.
Inaudible, meaning the person who is transcribing the audio tape could not hear what was said, but that there was something said.
Yeah, that's my understanding what it means.
But you were present during that conversation and you heard Miss or Angela G say what you wrote into your report, which was specifically she had noticed a black eye but did not ask him what happened. Is that correct?
Yeah. Can I refer to my report prior to?
This report?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so
You had a chance to
yeah,
refresh your recollection?
she did not ask him what had happened.
I'm sorry, she did not ask him.
Correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Is the report your interpretation of the conversation?
Yeah, it's what she said, what she told me.
But you looked at the transcript, correct?
Right.
And, but no one presented to you?
Object to this as leading and asked and answered.
Well, I don't know, but just finish your question.
Yes, has anyone played the audio tape for you to verify what she actually said in that part?
I'll allow the question.
No,
And your summary of her, is your report a summary of your interview with her?
it is.
And when you're summarizing it, are you going off memory?
What I normally do, my practice is I'm summarizing it as I'm listening to it. So if it's in the report, that's what I remember that's what I heard being said.
Okay. So that's what you believe you heard on there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I have nothing.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that last part. Are you still maintaining that she told you she didn't ask him how he got the black eye?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Nothing further.
You may step down, Detective. Thank you.
Thank you. People call Detective Masterson.
All right. All right, Detective, if you could raise your right hand.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. That's it. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Scott Masterson, SCOTT, MASTERSON.
Yes, thank you. What is it that you do for a living today?
I'm retired.
And when did you retire?
May of 2022.
And before your retirement, what was your occupation?
I was a police detective for the Los Angeles Police Department.
And how many years had you been a police officer?
Police officer and detective for 34 years.
How many years as a detective?
27, something about that.
And about how many of those years investigating homicides?
About 15.
Now, were you one of the investigating officers in this case, in the death of Dr. Amie Harwick?
Yes, I was.
And what does that mean to be one of the investigating officers?
The investigating officers, or IOs as we call them, you work the case, you investigate, you interview witnesses, you help collect evidence, you meet with the district attorney, or whatever it takes to get a resolution to the case. That's your position. I think maybe the easiest way to think of it is you're a general contractor on a building, so we oversee everything. We got plumbers, we got electricians, we got flooring people, roofing.
He's making an analogy.
Yeah.
So we got it. Go ahead.
So there are several detectives assisting to investigate this case,
Correct.
but you're one of the main detectives that things are funneled to.
Right.
Well, I think he's paraphrasing what he stated.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And who's the other investigating officer in this case?
Detective Carranza.
And it's he the gentleman that's here behind me,
Yes.
President Court? Thank you. And on February 15th, 2020, when were you notified or assigned to investigate the death of Amie Harwick?
I was notified at my home through a phone call sometime in the early morning hours before 5 a.m.
Okay, and why did they notify you as opposed to some other detective?
West Bureau Homicide, where I was assigned, we had what we call the on-call teams, meaning that you were responsible to answer the phone and be available to respond when necessary. And it was just the luck of the draw.
And at about what time did you arrive at 2086 Mount Street on February 15, 2020?
About 5 a.m.
And were other people there already?
Yes.
And do you remember who was there? I don't need names, but just the type of personnel that was there.
There was uniformed police officers who were the first responders to the location. I don't remember if there were other detectives that arrived before me, but it was mainly uniformed personnel.
And at around 5 a.m., did you have a partner arrive to assist you with this investigation?
Yes.
And who was that?
Detective Carranza.
And was there a log started to identify people who were coming into the crime scene?
Yes.
And was there an internal log that started at 5 a.m.?
Yes.
And why at 5 a.m. if officers were already there at about 1:30 a.m.?
Well, the original officers, the first responders, once they get to a location, their first task is preservation of human life. So the first thing they do is they're looking to save a life. Do we need an ambulance? What do we need? Then it's make sure the scene is safe and secure for any follow along people that may come along. And then once it's been established that we have a crime scene, then they will set up the yellow tape, block off traffic, do whatever's needed, and start the log so they can then keep track of who comes in and who comes out of the crime scene.
And so why was it started at 5 a.m.?
It took them about that much time to get everything in position and people in place to work the crime scene.
And were photographs taken of any evidence at the location?
Yes.
And at this point, when you're there at 5 a.m., do you have an idea of what has occurred at that location?
I mean, you got a call about the nature of what was occurring?
Yes.
Okay, so you had an idea?
Yeah, I was told that there was a homicide.
Okay.
And based on that, does that affect how you investigate the case
Yes.
and the kind of things you look for?
Yes.
And now, were photographs taken of items found at that location or around that location?
Yes.
And was a property report generated?
Yes.
And a property report would be where you report what items you're recovering at this particular location.
Yes.
And would they all be tied in to the report number in this case, 20-06-06-220?
Yes.
I'm going to show you a series of photographs. Looking here, this is a photograph showing the front of the home of 2086, and then some.
So they've been marked already?
No. May this be marked People's Next in Order number 79A through D. And I'm going to try to go quickly through these, and you can just tell us what you see here. Looking at 79A. Does that show the front patio to 2086 Mount Street?
Yes.
And you see the French doors there?
I do.
And there appear to be some damage to them. I don't know if you can see it on this photograph.
Yes, there does.
Looking at 79B, can you tell the jury what is this photograph of?
This is the back side of the house that we were just looking at. The front of, there's a hill and some shrubs, bushes in
Well,
the
is
back
this-
of the house.
Let me ask, is this the neighbor's house, the back of the neighbor's house?
Yes,
And was that like an empty lot behind the neighbor's house?
yes,
And looking here at 79B, and I'm gonna go to C, is that a close-up of that item?
yes, it is.
And it has a marker with a PID 1. What does PID stand?
That stands for photo identification number.
Now, is photo identification number different than property item number?
Yes.
Can you explain the difference?
Sure. So a PID number, photo ID number, is just a number that's used sequentially to note different items that were discovered or interested in. An item number is a number that's given to something that we seize or take and then book into our property for use as evidence later on. So a photo ID number and a property or a item number may not match up. You know, photo ID may not be item 1.
And looking here at photograph D, do you see where it says property ID number? And then it has on this bag at number 35, and also on the very top it says item 35. This photo ID number 1, but it was booked as property item number 35.
Correct.
Did you go to the patio area of 2086 Mount Street?
Yes.
And did you see evidence at that location?
Yes.
And were photographs taken?
Yes.
And are you there when some of these photographs are taken?
Yes, I am.
And do you have any input on the photo ID numbers as to what would be the next photo ID number?
Some, yes.
What does that mean, some, yes?
Well, when we're looking at an area, you know, I'm looking at different things, and so I'll tell the photographer, okay, let's put a number here. Let's put 3, 4, 5, 6, and so I'm directing the numbers.
Looking here at the series of photographs labeled A through I, may this be marked as people's number 80?
81.
81?
Yes.
Yes. Looking at 81, we'll go through this. Does this photograph show the back patio to 2086 and several photo ID markers at that location?
Yes, it does.
Looking at B, is this a close-up of photo ID number 2?
Yes.
And what is that?
That was a hair squinty or something, I think they call it.
Scrunchy?
Scrunchy, yes.
Yeah, everybody, all the women answered there.
Looking at photograph C, does this photograph show a close-up of that item, photo ID number 2?
Not a close-up. This is more of a general shot.
I'm sorry, general shot of number 2,
Yes,
and also of 4, 6, and 3.
yes,
Looking at photograph D, is this a close-up of what appears to be a dress?
yes,
And you reviewed the property report to see what particular item number this dress received?
yes,
And is this item number 23, is that the correct item number for the dress?
yes, it is.
And looking at photograph E, is this a close-up of that dress?
Yes, it is.
And it appears to be torn, is that correct?
Torn, cut.
And that could have been done by the paramedics.
Yes,
Looking at photograph F, photo ID number 4, you see that?
I do.
Now, how is, this appears to be blood.
Yes.
How is that collected?
Typically, what what will happen is either the detective or criminalist will take a sampling of the red stain by using a like a big Q-tip and just swabbing it and getting a sample onto the cotton head of the big Q-tip, and then it'll get packaged and preserved.
Objection foundation as to the collection of blood. I don't think Mr. Avila has laid foundation.
You can inquire about that.
How many years have you investigated homicides?
Around 15 or so.
How many homicides have you investigated
As the primary or just in general?
in general?
Oh, I over 100, I think, is a very safe number.
And during those times, have you seen the collection of blood?
I've witnessed it and done it myself. Yes.
And is one method is to swab the blood?
Yes.
And was that done in this case?
Yes.
Looking at photograph G, does this show a swab related to the collection of that blood sample?
Yes.
Looking at photograph H, is this another photograph that shows an overall view of various photo IDs, including number 5?
Yes.
And that appears to be near some, what do you call that?
Sprinklers.
Sprinklers. Valves. I was looking at valves.
Sprinkler valves. Okay.
Looking at I, is that a close-up of that?
Yes.
And what does that appear to be?
A wig, a hair piece.
Or just interrupt, that was actually people's E.
80?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay.
Can we be, can we, instead of calling it 81, can we call that 80?
Yes.
So I'm just gonna scratch out 81 and write 80 on 80A. All right, thank you. Looking at another series of photographs, A through I, may this remark people's number 81?
Yes. It is. It's the same.
Looking at people's 81, is this an overall view of photo ID numbers 4, 6, and 3?
And 2, yes.
And 2. Thank you. And photograph B, is that a close-up of number 6? And I'm just gonna go back to 81A. That shows where the general location for number 6.
Yes, it does.
For photo ID 6. And looking at photograph B of this exhibit, does that show a close-up of photo ID 6?
Yes.
And what is that?
I believe it's an earring of some sort.
Objection, speculation.
Well, you said you believe it is, right? You can't conclusively state that it is, right?
I'm afraid I from this picture I can't really tell.
Okay.
Do you have the property report with you?
I may.
Well, I'm not gonna go through that, but it looks like what?
At this point, I'm not really sure what it
Okay,
is.
that's okay. Looking at photograph C, is this a close-up of that item?
Yes.
Does that help at all?
The back of an earring,
You don't know.
but I don't know for sure.
But that was also booked into evidence
Yes.
as item 26.
Yes.
Looking at this photograph D, does that show a wide shot of the location of photo ID number 7?
Yes.
Photograph E, does that show a close-up of photo ID number 7?
Yes, it does.
And was that designated property item number 27?
Yes.
As shown us on the top right corner.
Yes.
And can you tell us what that is?
A necklace.
Looking at photograph F, is that a close-up of that photo ID number 7 item?
Yes, it is.
And to you, it appears to be a necklace with some type of emblem on one part of the necklace?
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
Yes, it's to me it is a necklace with a some sort of charm.
Photograph G, is this a view of the location of photo ID number 8, what appears to be some boots.
Yes,
Photograph H, is that a close-up of those boots?
yes, it is.
And now this photograph H, this is taken at a different location.
Correct. This is not at the crime scene.
And what's the purpose of having a ruler right there in the middle of this photograph?
It's just to give you some kind of context as to the size, the length, the width.
And was this booked into evidence as item number 28?
Yes, it was.
Looking at photograph I, does this show the heel of the boot?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and was the heel measured?
Yes, it is.
It was. Thank you. As you're walking around the backyard, did you notice anything unusual about a statue that was out there in the backyard?
I did.
And what was that?
One of the arms on the statue was broken off. It was a statue that had multiple arms on each side.
You want to have a series of photographs depicting that statue. May this be marked as people's 82 photographs A through E.
All right.
Looking at 82A, can you tell the jury what is shown there?
So this is the backyard at the house, and that's the statue off in the back right corner of the property.
Thank you. Photograph B, is that a close-up of that same statue?
Yes, it is.
And there appears to be something to the left at the bottom of the statue?
Yes.
Photograph C, is that another photograph showing something to the bottom left of the statue on this photograph with a photo ID number 9?
Yes, just to the right of the placard card is the arm.
Looking at photograph D, can you tell us what is shown here?
That's a close-up of the arm on the ground.
And why would you say it appeared to be broken?
Well, you said it was, you believed it was broken off,
Yes.
okay, but it's certainly not attached to the statue. So, okay, speak to itself, so.
Could you tell from the break and from the statute when it may have been broken?
When?
Yes.
Yes, sustain.
Can you describe the statute and the particular hand that appears to have been broken?
So the statue was in the back right corner of the property, elevated off of the ground level. It was like up in a planter type of an area. And the statue had, like I said, multiple arms on each side of the body of the statue. And there was just one point where an arm was broken off or was no longer attached to the body of the statue like all the other arms.
But let's stop there, Council. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take a recess. We'll see you tomorrow at 9:30. Be well.
Thanks for watching. Hey, Justice Jane, I haven't seen you in a while. Thanks for watching with me, guys. I will be live in a couple of hours again, and I hope I see you there. Have a good day.